I'm Ellen Whitlock-Baker from Alumni and Student Engagement, or sorry, Alumni and Stakeholder Engagement and the UW Alumni Association. So I'd like to begin by recognizing that wherever you're joining us from, you're on land that was forcibly taken from its original inhabitants. The University of Washington itself is on the land of the Coast Salish peoples who have lived in what is present-day Western Washington and southwestern British Columbia since time immemorial. For those non-Indigenous folks on the call, I encourage you all to do some research about the land you are currently residing on. We're posting a website right now in the comments that you can visit to look up the original inhabitants of the land where you are. I encourage you to find the website for the tribe or tribes whose land you inhabit and learn more about them. We cannot begin to do our work today and in the future without first taking the critical step of learning what our country has taken from its first inhabitants and how the descendants of those people, many of whom we work with and serve as alumni, donors, volunteers, students, and friends, continue to be affected by colonization. It's my absolute pleasure to have created and annually get to organize Engagement Summer Session with a host of incredible partners over these past 5 years as part of Alumni and Stakeholder Engagement's annual portfolio of programming. So there are a lot of new faces with us today, so allow me a moment of context. At UWA, we began Engagement Summer Session because the people we serve, all the folks responsible for alumni engagement in all the schools and colleges at UW, our constituent relations officers, or CROs, didn't have very many opportunities for professional development. There aren't very many alumni engagement conferences locally, and those that are can be prohibitively expensive. So we started Engagement Summer Session 5 years ago. We created a half-day mini conference in the hub specifically for those CROs about topics on alumni engagement. And we were really surprised when more than just CROs registered for this conference. And every year since, we have built in more content and grown until we are here today. So I'm thrilled, proud, and honestly a little terrified that over 400 people have signed up for this year's Engagement Summer Session. It's a big deal. And you out there who I can't really see, but wish I could, include vice presidents, deans, faculty members, board members, non-advancement staff, fundraisers, marketers, whole teams of advancement shops, and most importantly, our stupendous group of CROs who work every day to engage the broadest group of alumni and friends. CROs, this one's for you. It always has and always will be. Thank you for the work that you do. And thank you for bringing so many friends this year. So there's an important thread that connects us all here today, aside from our passion for the University of Washington. We're all of us, engagement officers, whether you're working with prospective students, alumni, donors, other staff, or the community. No matter what your position, you share in this critical work of building community, forming, nurturing, and strengthening that connection to UW and each other. It's really phenomenal that you have all shown up here today to work better and well, no matter what your position. So as you can see, ESS this year is a little different. First, of course, we'd all love to be in the hub right now, clutching our little paper cups that are never quite full enough of Bay Laurel coffee and having our Danishes and talking to each other and looking at the sun streaming in the windows. But of course, we can't do that. And so we're here virtually. I'm giving you all a virtual hug, and also please have patience with us as we attempt to do this for the very first time, and we hope that Zoom is very, very kind to us today. More importantly, though, this year's Engagement Summer Session is 100% completely focused on discussions of how we think about and act on racial equity in our work engaging our community, how we disrupt racism and break down systemic inequity. We have thoughtfully programmed the last 3 years of ESS with a strong equity lens, to use my friend Priya Frank's term, and you might all remember her session on engaging with an equity lens a few years ago. We've had keynotes and sessions over the past many years that have explored our work and how it needs to change in order for us to truly engage all and serve all. And this year we're going all in. I am incredibly grateful to be a part of Alumni and Stakeholder Engagement and UWA, which has championed ESS every year for these 5 years and given our team the resources and support to freely program this event. Our fantastic UWA board, many of whom are here today, has also been incredibly supportive. I'm only one representative of UAA and ACE, and I'm proud to be here representing this team that works tirelessly to engage our community and has done so for over 150 years. So these 2 days aren't intended to be the definitive central convening on racial equity for advancement. What they are meant to be is inspiring, challenging, provoking, and hopefully a movement to action for this community of professionals who are deeply devoted to their work. What it's not time for, not today and tomorrow during ESS, is to be fragile. So I'm now talking to the white folks on the call. We recognize that we're all going through our own journeys with understanding our place in racism and realization, especially for white folks, that we are part of the problem, that we have benefited our entire lives from systems that actively hurt people of color. So wherever you are on that journey, keep doing that personal work. We all need to do it. But we ask that you keep the tears and fragility away from today and tomorrow's sessions, and honor the speakers who have been so gracious to come and share their thoughts and educate us by listening, learning, and asking questions about the work and how to move forward. Not about your personal shame, fragility, or feelings. But if you ever need to work those out, I'm here as a fellow white person. You can always come to me. So this year, my partners in creation of ESS are Amy Goodlow and Rabia Ramzan. I couldn't ask for better co-conspirators and thought partners, and I'm incredibly grateful for all that they are doing today. We also have Zoe Gano behind the scenes here, who's using her mighty event management skills to make sure we don't completely go off the rails. And a thanks to Melissa Kreptal as well for helping us make sure see how many people it takes just to make sure we don't screw this up. So thank you, everyone. And finally, I just want to express gratitude for the wisdom of Priya Frank, Leilani Lewis, Casey Weinkoop, and Terry Hiroshima, who helped us think through these sessions and our approach and put us in touch with colleagues who are now the speakers you'll see over the next 2 days. I'm deeply, deeply grateful for their collaboration and trust. So thank you all for being here, for choosing to spend your time listening and learning. So thank you very much to our speakers for your willingness to be here today and tomorrow. Thank you for our moderators for giving your time and willingness to be vulnerable and have hard conversations. And thank you to all of you for being here, listening, learning, and most importantly, committing to making lasting change. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our first session of the day, How Philanthropy's Lack of Imagination is a Barrier to Equity and Justice. Please help me welcome Senior Associate Vice President for Development Programs here at UW, Lee Heck.
Hello, everybody. Great to be with you today. And I want to start with a quick shout out to Ellen, Amy, Rabia, Zoe, and Melissa for their great work, with a special nod of the head to Ellen for 5 years of standing up the engagement summer session. What a journey this has been. I've had a privilege to participate in some portion of each of those sessions every year, and it has grown into something magnificent, and it's never been needed more than it is this year. Thank you all. I have the great opportunity to help facilitate a conversation with Vu Le, and for those of you who don't know Vu, you're in for a treat over the next hour of great conversation, important perspectives, a fair amount of humor, and I guarantee some important provocation. I have spent the majority of my time here in Seattle supporting the local nonprofit community in Western Washington nonprofit community. And I've been involved in all the organizations in our region and have done a fair amount of mentoring and training. And Vu's voice has been an extraordinarily important one for a very long time in our sector. So give me just a moment to give you a brief bio of Vu, and then we're going to jump into this conversation. I need reading glasses. Vu Le is a writer, speaker, vegan, Pisces, and the former executive director of the Rainier Valley Corps, a nonprofit in Seattle that promotes social justice by developing leaders of color, strengthening organizations led by communities of color, and fostering collaboration between diverse communities. Vu's passion to make the world better, combined with a low score on the law school admissions test, drove him to the field of nonprofit work, where he learned that we should take the work seriously, but not ourselves. There's tons of humor in the nonprofit world, and someone needs to document it. He is going to do that, and with the hope that one day a TV producer will see how cool and interesting our field is and make a show about nonprofit work featuring attractive actors attending strategic planning meetings and filling 990 tax forms. Who will play Vu? That's the question. Known for his no BS approach, irreverent sense of humor, and love of unicorns, Vu has been featured in dozens, if not hundreds, of his own blog posts at Nonprofit AF. His blog was previously known as Fundraising with Balls. We love him for that. And I'm pleased to welcome Vu Lee to our conversation today with the Engagement Summer Session. Hello, Vu.
Good morning, Lee. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me.
There were a number of chats in the comments about yesterday's session. We're going to get to that, but I want to offer a congratulations yesterday on the launch of the community-centered fundraising effort. That's really fantastic, and that's going to have a lot to do with today.
Yeah.
Vu and I have agreed that this is going to be a conversation today, so I'm going to ask him some questions. I have no doubt he'll ask me some questions. We're going to do our best to take questions and input from you all, and the team is going to try to feed that to me in multiple different ways. So, Vu, here's my first question, which is to really tell us about yourself. How has your commitment to an equity-centered approach to your work changed how you lead and how you think about the role of philanthropy?
Thank you so much, Lee. And thank you again, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. And I got my snake plant in the back. Psychologically, it's designed to make you feel like I'm approachable. And it's, yeah. So I'm really glad to be here. My story, I was born in Vietnam. My father fought against the communists and he was put into re-education camp. Vietnam has its own history of colonization. We took over the Champa Kingdom and there is a reckoning with that as well. And we fled Vietnam and it was really rough just being here in the United States, being an immigrant kid and adjusting to life over here. And I didn't really appreciate just what my family went through. But I think one story that really affected how I think about equity and our role in it is my older sister, who was one of the kids who were born from U.S. soldiers who came over. And these Amerasian kids were just completely discriminated against, and some of them were abandoned on the streets. And my sister, my adopted sister, was one of them. And we brought her back to our village, and she remained there, but she still faced a lot of prejudice and discrimination for looking different and for being born from the wrong father. And she told me that she could not actually go to school. They would not let her go to school in my village. But she really wanted to go to school. And so she would stand by the window with her notebook and learn at the window while other kids were inside. Even when it rained and we have heavy monsoon rain, she would still stand there at the window learning to read and write in Vietnamese. And that story just affects how I think about things, because I feel like a lot of us are inside the room. And there are a lot of people standing at the window who are just trying their best to survive. And if we are in the room, then we have an obligation to open the door and to open the windows. But so many of us are the ones who are unintentionally probably closing the door on people. So my immigrant experience growing up in Vietnam and then over here has really shaped the way that I think about our roles and our privileges that we have in doing this work. I would love to hear about your story, Lee.
My story is a prototypical middle-class white American story for a while. I grew up in East Central Indiana, the third child of parents who stayed married. I grew up in a small town of mostly white people. I had a few friends of color, but it was a very wide experience, and I thought that was everyone's experience growing up. I just thought that's how the world was. My father fought in the Korean War and didn't find a way to college, but I always grew up knowing I was going to go to college. That was just the expectation. So I am a first-generation college kid who went to a big public university in the Midwest. Go Hoosiers. That's a lawful lot like the University of Washington. And it's one of the reasons I have such a passion about higher education, because that was my experience. I went to school on a lot of scholarships. I was very involved in my college experience. And it was in college that I found my way out as a gay man. And so that part of my journey was complicated, but listen, my parents always loved me. I got through all of that. I never felt abandoned. And so again, in that experience, I had the prototypical white family experience. But I'm also a gay man of a particular age, and AIDS devastated my community. When I was 27, my partner died of AIDS. And that was a very complicated journey. And that experience is what led me to the nonprofit world, because I recognized that I could no longer work in the corporate sector. I had to find a way to do work that I felt like was empowering people in the world and doing good in my community, and that my vocation needed to become my avocation. And so I became I talked my way into the first development director job at a small nonprofit in Dallas that served the gay and lesbian community and worked with communities of color, because at that point in Dallas, where I lived, it was gay men and Black people who were dealing with the HIV and AIDS epidemic. And I spent 4 years doing that work in Dallas. And that work was what brought Bill and me to Seattle in 1996, when I became the major gifts officer for the Northwest AIDS Foundation. I did that work for a few more years here in Seattle and found my way to UW. But it was my own journey and my own recognition of the impact I needed to have on the community that led me to the nonprofit world. And I've been at UW for 20 years now in a multitude of positions. For me, Vu, one of the things that you said that's so powerful is how your lens is one that I don't see, and I have to work really hard to make sure I'm thinking about all the time. And your notion of windows and doors is one that I have to focus on consciously every day. And so I'm glad for the reminder. So I appreciate your question, Vu. Can you take just a couple of minutes and tell us about the community-centered fundraising effort? And let's start with how many people were signed up for your launch yesterday, sir?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we had 2,700 people attend yesterday's webinar. I was hoping for 1,000 people. So 2,700 people was a lot. It was very exciting, but it did crash our website a couple of times. So yeah, it was really good. I feel like our sector is ready for this sort of new imagining of what fundraising could be. I want to say, first of all, though, that I really appreciate fundraisers. I'm one of them. We all do amazing work. Yesterday, I was joking that we're like on a show of Chopped, right? Where on Chopped, you're given a basket of ingredients and random ingredients, and you're expected to make these amazing meals out of them. So it's like, here's a trout and some marshmallow peeps, go and make dessert or something like that. And oftentimes, this is like fundraisers. We're like given a basket of random stuff. Here's a CRM that's 5 years old, and here's a website that's updated by your board member's nephew. You may not experience this in higher education, but this is what's going on in the rest of the field. And here's $20 for canapes and go and end homelessness. That's basically fundraising in a nutshell in our sector. And fundraising is just so brilliant and so creative all the time. I'm just impressed by how charismatic we all are. Obviously very attractive and extremely smart, right? And I'm just really impressed. At the same time, though, we have to acknowledge that in many ways, we have to think about how we're complicit in perpetuating a lot of the things that we are raising money to fight. We exist in a system of white supremacy, anti-Blackness, anti-indigeneity, and xenophobia. And we just don't realize that we're swimming in this water, and our fundraising is affected by that. For example, we don't talk to our donors about how their wealth might have come from colonization and slavery. And we just, and maybe they should just give most of this money back or all of it back. But instead, what we do is we ask them to feel really good about supporting a cause, and then we thank them for it. And then they can be merry on their way and not think about where their wealth came from and whether this money should have been theirs in the first place. And then we perpetuate this nonprofit Hunger Games while doing that, where everyone is scrambling, fighting with one another for resources and donors and things. And that is not how we're going to address systemic injustice, by creating this Hunger Games and getting donors to not think about systemic injustice. So this is the revolution that is coming for fundraising, and I'm really excited about that.
Ooh, that's such compelling language about how to think about these things. And when we were preparing for our conversation today, we talked a little bit about how UW is so large and is such a behemoth and an organizational structure that looks very different than the small nonprofits that I grew up in and some of the small nonprofits that you grew up in. And our capacity to flex and change has not been as easy, or at least perceived to be as easy. And one of the things that is so compelling about what you're doing in the community-centered fundraising work and some of the conversations is how to have these conversations and think about these conversations with donors. One of the things that's made UW be very successful, and I shared numbers with you when we talked, really extraordinarily powerful numbers of how people feel compelled to support UW and send their philanthropy this way. But a large focus of our success has been around this notion of donor centricity. Many of us in the profession know Penelope Burke as sort of the queen of donor-centric work. And that's largely how UW has been focused in the past about how we do this work. Can you tell us about your perspective on donor-centric fundraising and the opportunities to change in that space and how to think about this world differently? Because that's not how we think now.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, I do appreciate just donor-centered fundraising for many of the good things it has done, right? It has brought in a lot of resources into many different causes that we all care about. And it has, in many ways, reversed some of the bad practices we've had in the past, where we ignored donors and didn't pay attention and we were very self-centered. The problem is that the pendulum has swung way to one side, where now I have seen blog posts that literally say things like your donors are literally the center of your world. First of all, they're using literally wrong, which is very annoying to me, right? But they're like, donors are heroes. Our only job is to get our donors, these heroes, these magnanimous, amazing people, to support this and get them to connect it to things that they care about, because they're the ones who make things happen. And we are just a conduit to things. And I think that is a dangerous sort of philosophy to have. None of us should be in the center. The collective community that we are in should be the center. But the problem is that it works. You know, it does work. And that's the challenge, is that we are, not only does it work, but it creates the conditions for it to work, because we're conditioning donors to expect the same things. So then when we do those things that they expect, then it works, and then they continue to expect them. So we create this self-fulfilling prophecy in our engagement with donors. But the challenge that I see is that it avoids them thinking about, it allows them to avoid thinking about many more difficult things like racism, like xenophobia, and so this is why we have more donors giving money to, dog shelters and animal causes, which is great. I'm a vegan, I totally support these. But it should not be easier. Like, for example, with the racist incident with Amy Cooper, calling the police on a black man who was bird watching, Christian Cooper, right? People were more concerned about the dog that she was strangling than the black man whose life she was threatening with violence and death here. And in many ways, it's because we have conditioned our donors to care more about certain things, because we reaffirm them, we reward them for caring about certain things by giving them little micro and reinforcement through our handwritten thank you notes, our calls, etc. This is probably the most controversial thing that I'll probably say, is that I kind of see donor-centered fundraising like husband-centered marriages, let's say, right? I'm a husband. I would love it if my partner sends me a note saying, Vu, and every time I do the dishes, she'll write me a note saying, Vu, thanks to you, our family is stronger. Because you did the dishes, we are now a stronger family. I'm like, yes, if I get a thank you note every single time I did the dishes, then yeah, I would totally, I'm like, oh, I feel so appreciated. I'm going to do the dishes every single day. But no, I am a partner, an equal partner in this marriage, and I need to do the dishes whether or not I am thanked for it. And yeah, we should thank one another in a good marriage. But we should also be able to say, hey, you know what? You screwed up there. And what you did over there is not good, And we need to think about the future of our children and stuff. But donor-centered fundraising is just one partner chasing after the other, constantly thanking them forever. And then, yes, the chores keep being done and they feel really good about that. But it just feels superficial, and it does not get to the heart of what we're trying to do as a sector, which is to address systemic injustice. And that means addressing slavery and colonization, and the murder of Black people, and the murder of Black trans people, and murder and missing Indigenous women and kids in cages right now. So we have to address those things, and we can't just go around thanking people all the time.
Vu, I'm sure there are snaps across all of this Zoom call now thank you for the passion you had in that question. I do want to share with you, though, in my house, it is a very husband-centric environment. So that works in my house. I can't say that for everybody else's house, but it does work for me. You are appropriately and thoughtfully provoking us to think about the work that we do and the way we go about our donor centricity. And you're calling out lots of questions that are there. And you and I had talked about the fact that the evolution of how we do things at UW is something that we're really leaning into and trying to figure out how to do anew. And the thoughts you're sharing with us today are going to be fodder for that conversation. There are two particular threads I want to plumb with you with this frame that you've raised. Question one is, how can a fundraiser at the University of Washington, from your perspective, bring to her focus an equity lens in these kinds of conversations with donors? The second part of it is, how can the UW think about standing up priorities, opportunities for engagement that have that same lens, that help us marry what donors may want to do to advance society in a way that creates the kind of change that UW can be a factor in? In other words, how do we create the kinds of equity-centered priorities at our university that will attract the kinds of philanthropic investment that can help move that forward?
Well, thank you, Lee, for two very complicated questions simultaneously.
I did my best.
I can talk on forever about this. I would also love to hear your perspectives, Lee, about this, because it is kind of a new framework to things, and I would love to hear your concerns about things, because there are a lot of concerns. We haven't figured out everything, and we have to explore this thing. But how does yeah, go ahead.
So let's talk about this question about fundraisers first, and let me be super honest about where we are. And this is a question that one of my colleagues posed to me at some point in the recent days. When we're in conversations with our older, wealthier donors who significantly skew white, who significantly skew male, the opportunity to bring a racial lens, an equity lens to these conversations, and to provoke those conversations are complicated, and feels like we might be in a position to alter a relationship, damage a relationship. Those are complicated spaces. We want to try to arm our frontline staff and, frankly, everybody in our work who is externally facing. And there's a whole lot of us in our session who are not fundraisers, who are externally facing. And so I'd be interested in your perspective, because this is something I don't know how to talk about yet at UW. How do we bring this question of equity to our work in such a way that we feel empowered to talk to people, not just be in service to the great thinking that you spoke to before?
Thanks, Lee. Deidre confirmed that with something called elephant bumping. I've never heard of that. What is elephant bumping?
It is the notion of influential, wealthy people intersecting with influential, wealthy people.
Oh, I had never heard. I just learned something new here. This is great. This is definitely a challenge. What I would probably say is, I would ask you, how have you been engaging with the wealthy older white donors? How has it?
Equity lens. In all candor, without an equity lens. If that is someone's issue, and that's where someone wants to go, absolutely I engage in that conversation. But have I, as a fundraiser, taken a position of provocation and or bringing that issue to those people? No, I have not. And that is absolutely something I need to change. But in all candor, I don't, and I haven't.
Well, thank you, Lee. I appreciate that. I would say a few things for us to consider. One is, in many ways, we have been underestimating our donors. And this is the moment to actually engage, because in the past, remember, Black Lives Matter was a fringe movement that a lot of people just didn't pay any attention to. And now it seems that if you are not paying attention to it, then you are on the fringe in many ways, right? So this is now the moment for us to actually say, you know what, society is moving this direction. Have you seen the protests? Have you seen the statues coming down? We have to start talking about these things. So being able to find a new approach to actually talk to donors, but we have been underestimating because the donor-centered model, right? We think that donors are very fragile, and in many ways they are, but there are quite a few of them who are not and who are ready for these conversations. I have one donor friend who attended a workshop that asked her to analyze where her family's wealth came from. She discovered that it was from stealing land from a native family. And she decided now that when she gets her inheritance, she's going to give 100% of her inheritance back to the native community, right? Like in the past, that would never have happened. But now more and more people are actually having these conversations with donors. So I would say, yes, have these conversations with donors, maybe not all of them at the same time. You know, you might have to pick and choose the ones who might indicate that they're ready for a more challenging conversation. Invite them to conversation. I have another group who sent out Ijeoma Ulo's the book, So You Want to Talk About Race, to their major donors and had a book club to talk about this as a soft intro into this, right? So we can do that. The other thing is, though, that equity requires us to think about what we are willing to give up, right? You and I are dudes. We are used to being able to just like apply to any jobs because we think that we're competent at everything, even when we're not. Okay. And so dudes are out there applying to jobs that we don't qualify for. And now there has to be a movement to say, you know what, maybe dudes should like not apply as much. Cisgender men need to just not apply for things. Well, this sort of idea of what we need to give up in terms and acknowledgement of our privilege is really important. Like my friend is giving up her inheritance to repair for the damage, the harm caused to the native community. Then you and I have to think about that. At the same time, our fundraising approach has to be the same thing. Maybe you've raised $760 million this year, but are you willing to raise $500 million, losing $260 million if it means you're going to be able to advance a more equitable society? That is something that every department of development has to think about now. Not just raising as much money as possible, which it has been our primary directive, is raising as much money as possible. And now our directive has to be, that's no longer good enough. It has to be, what is the benefit to our society? If we can do better with $500 million raised than $760 million raised, then that is something that we should aim for.
That notion of measuring by impact as opposed to dollars is one that we have been talking about, Vu, and I think is a very provocative one, and that is an institutional change that we are exploring and need to lean into even more. I want to make a couple of quick points. One is remind folks that the question asking opportunities through thought exchanges there, so don't miss the chance to do that. There's been a couple of questions that have risen that I want to pose to you, Vu, from participants in the audience. And Dave Isle raises something, or David Chow, one of the two, I can't remember, flew by. And I want to be really clear to say this. Though I don't always think about the equity lens in my conversations with donors. We have extraordinary folks on our staff who are focused on these questions through our alumni and student engagement efforts, through the work of the Office of Minority Affairs and Diversity, from equity efforts related all across campus. There are people who bring this focus on a daily basis, and I want to acknowledge them and not miss the chance to say that there is a portion of us whose job is to seek philanthropic support for the university's effort to address these questions. And those teams have been doing this in a significant way for a long period of time, and all of us rally when we can. My response about my work was specific to what I do or don't do. So I don't want to give the impression that to all of my colleagues across campus who do amazing work in this space and are focused on this in this space, and our own educational internal opportunities are strong. So Leilani Lewis is now leading our new equity council, the work going on in our equity club for people who want to take the personal journey of understanding how they have been part of this racist society that's endemic to who we are, and our ability to change that. All of that is there. So I want to acknowledge those things, Vu. And I do want to say to you that one of the things that I think is true for those of us who have relationships with donors is the capacity to engage them in conversation is something most of them really appreciate. The opportunity to bring new ideas to them, for people who want to make a difference in the world. And I truly believe that most people who are engaged in philanthropy at whatever level are doing it because they care about making a difference in the world. Many people see UW as a vector to do that. I've had lots of conversations personally where I've been able to say to donors, tell me what you care about. Tell me about what you aspire to the future to look like, and how can we help you figure out how to get there? Reframing that kind of conversation with some of the stuff you said earlier is something that I took to heart, and I will be thinking about how to do that in a different sort of way. So I appreciate that provocation. Let me zip to another screen where there are a couple of questions. Here's one. Vu, do you think meaningful philanthropy can be achieved through a digital or broad-based focus? And what are the challenges in that spaces related to equity?
Digital or broad-based, this is definitely not my area of expertise at all. I do appreciate something that Beth Cantor, who's another leader in the sector, mentioned about algorithmic discrimination. So many of the algorithms are driven by, again, white men. And so that affects the algorithms that are being developed and who gets recognized. So many of the platforms that we use, the technologies that we use are also inherently very racist. And we don't think about that. We don't think that Zoom is racist. We don't think about, all the CRMs that we're using might be problematic in this way. But I think that we do have to think about, even as we go about doing more digital stuff in this pandemic crisis, that we still have many challenges. Many people are not able to access digital conversations, virtual conversations. So we have to be able to think about that in a way as well. But again, this is definitely not my area of expertise. I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
So I have the great privilege to support many of the teams at the center of the university that are focused on digital engagement, looking at our platforms and outreach through annual philanthropy and annual advancement analytics. And I am learning in this space, also not my great strength. I'm struck by your notion that racism in the algorithms. Algorithmic racism was a new phrase to me, and both it made me smile and pause because I think about what's going on with Facebook as a social media platform and how the algorithms are so significantly effective in that space. And I see that Kara's commenting on this, who leads our analytics team around these algorithmic racism pieces. So I'm with you. It's an area that I'm learning on. But what we know at the University of Washington is we have to figure out how to capitalize on the digital engagement strategies to do more work at scale that will allow us to focus on a different kind of engagement than perhaps what we've done in the past, to reach more people, to be more efficient, to think about how we deliver those messages. So that's going to be a good thread for us to hold on to. I noticed another comment from my colleague Sue Hayes-Mcqueen saying snaps up on the question of it here that we have to figure out in this space. So I'm with you. Thanks for that input on that question. I want to ask you to, if you can, as a fundraiser now, putting your fundraiser hat on, any best advice or thoughts about how someone as a fundraiser can weave this notion of equity lens into conversations, how to address those kinds of conversations, what to say, what to think about, how to see those cues to open those discussions?
Yeah, first of all, we have to acknowledge that we suck at talking about these issues. We have not been trained to talk about them. We took like a year.
And they're, particularly for white people, a very complicated, uncomfortable space to be that many choose to avoid.
Yeah, it is. And also, again, we're not trained on it. We took a year of trigonometry, right? With the sines and the cosines. And I don't know how many of us actually use trigonometry in our daily lives, right? Except tangents, which I'm going on one right now. But the point is, we are trained in certain things and not other things. We're not trained to talk about race and class and sexism and misogyny and things like that. And so it is very hard for us to talk about these things. So we need to be grounded in this. And I do like Jay Smoot's philosophy. He's a thought leader and a hip hop artist. And he talks about how we need to move away from this tonsillectomy model of talking about racism, and where it's like we attend one workshop and one anti-racism workshop, and it's like we got our racist tonsils removed, and now we can never be racist again. And then we get really offended when someone says, hey, actually what you said is kind of racist. And you're like, how dare you? I attended UIR training 5 years ago. I can never be racist again. He encourages us to move towards the dental hygiene model of talking about race, where we look in the mirror every single day and brush and floss the racism and things out of our teeth every single day. And someone says, hey, you got a little bit of racism stuck in your teeth. You don't get offended. You go, oh, thank you for pointing that out. I really appreciate that. I'm going to go look in the mirror and I'm going to floss it out. And we have to do that every single day because we're all going to make mistakes all the time. And does it mean that we're horrible people? No, because we all are going to get stuff stuck in our teeth, right? We're only horrible people if we stop looking in the mirror. And we're just like, no, I don't believe you. I don't have anything stuck in my teeth. And no, don't you ever look at my teeth ever again. Like that's when we become like not helpful to the world, right? So Jay Smooth. I really love his analogy, and I talk about it all the time. So we got to do a much better job doing that. And then we need to explore this with our donors, right? We don't do this with our donors. And we put up with racist, sexist things from our donors all the time because our mandate has been to raise as much money as possible. And so if that's our mandate, if that's our prime directive, to use a Star Trek analogy, then we are going to always think about what will bring us as much money. And that means, we're not going to offend our donors. But if our prime directive is justice and equity, then we have to start figuring out ways to talk to our donors about these things and saying, you know what, we really appreciate your money, but I do have to give you some feedback. What you said over there, that was racist. I know you didn't mean to, but here's the impact that it has on our communities. And we would love to talk to you about this. Right? And that's much harder.
Boo, I want to stop for a minute and acknowledge what you just said. First, I want to acknowledge the notion of equity dental floss. I'm taking that back to my dentist. It's going to be a new brand and great value in that. Thank you for equity dental floss.
Jay Smooth.
Jay Smooth. The last bit of what you just said, so powerful, so important for us all to hear, because UW has been driven and it's bent to do good. I want to fully acknowledge that no one was intending not to do good in this space. The conversation has been focused on how do we acquire and inspire additional resources to advance this university without the questions that you just posed. I will acknowledge and share, I remember a donor who is now deceased, so still no names, but when I would talk to this donor, I would be on the phone. When donor X would start on his racist rants, I would do this with the phone, wait till he stopped talking and re-engage, and I would just ignore it. Because I thought my job at the moment and my job at that time was to sustain that relationship and ensure that those resources kept flowing to do the good work that they were doing, because they were funding students, they were funding things that mattered. And then he would go on another racist tirade and I would do this. I did not address it. I can't speak on behalf of the whole University of Washington, but the gauntlet you just threw down about how do we think about changing the value proposition of philanthropy from the value of numbers exclusively to the power of what it can accomplish in good as it relates to what we want to try to do to advance the world is a really important conversation for us to wrestle. And that's not just about advancement. That's about the leadership of the university, the opportunities that we have. Those are hard transformational questions, but we are calling the question. And I never say it quite right, but James Baldwin is a personal hero. And one of the things that I reflect on regularly, particularly during the last bit of time, has been not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed unless it's faced. And we have to hold on to that mantra. So I want to thank you for throwing down that gauntlet just now about that, because this community needs to wrestle with that question in a very significant way. So
I mean, it's a gauntlet, but it's also an opportunity, right?
Totally.
I mean, people are ready for this. I mean, the corporations, Ben and Jerry's, Nike's, and like everyone has to embrace these conversations now. And in many ways, it is a way to actually to get donors engaged in a way that we haven't done before. And we are all terrified of losing funding by doing these things. But we've seen examples of of it actually working, right? Like I think the Girls Club, Girl Scouts, for example, they had a major donor, who offered $100,000, but only if they agreed to not serve transgender girls. And they said, "Well, screw you. We're not gonna do that. That's against our mission and our values." And so they rejected $100,000, and they went onto social media and said, "You know what? We had this asshole donor." Who took away $100,000, who would refuse not to give $100,000 and so can you help us raise this $100,000? And they got $300,000. So no, you may lose that donor. You say, hey, you know what? You're actually racist, and if you continue being this way, we cannot take any of your money because it's racist. And I know, and we appreciate what you've been doing in the past, but we can't. This is not good. It's racist. And yes. So Yeah, you might lose that donor, but you will probably gain a whole bunch more because you took that stand for equity and justice.
Vu, I'm trying to track all the questions that are coming my way, and I want to acknowledge to everybody on this call that Amy is doing a great job of curating those questions, and I can't possibly get to them all. So I am using moderator's prerogative to choose the ones that I'm going to pose to you. And one I'd like to ask you to spend a moment on, recognizing that this is a largely white institution with largely white people in leadership who care about making transitions, and we're all trying to figure out how we can do that in collaboration with one another, trying to listen to the voices of people of color and people who have been on this journey in different ways than we have to inform who we are.
Well, Lee, before we get to that, I would love to just hear your perspective. Why are you all so white? Why is UW so white?
I think it's so one of the it's a great question. I don't know that I have the definitive answer. I can give you my own suppositions about the evolution of this industry. I think it's a level of intentionality. I don't think that we have intentionally set, we are in the process of it and have done it for some years, not to say that it has not been a priority, but we have not intentionally said, how are we going to change the representation and inclusion at our institutions? And I think that is true across the sector, particularly in higher ed. Higher ed, even while the rest of the nonprofit sector, particularly advancement, has been very female focused, leadership in higher ed across the country has been white male dominated. And I think that's because it has been more of a corporate kind of structure, more sales oriented kind of structure. So I think it's about the historical way that our sector has been built and grown, not from a lack of willingness to try to make a good impact, or a belief that education is a vibrant and important vector to help make sustained change. But I think it has to do with where we've been in the history, and I think it requires a new level of intentionality moving forward to do it differently.
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate that. Yeah, all of these systems are interrelated. We have a lot of issues with HR policies. Many HR policies are discriminating against people. And in fact, higher education has been used as a way to discriminate. We still have, in the rest of the field, development jobs that require a BA or a master's, right? And it's like, why? What if someone is a brilliant fundraiser who was not able to finish their formal education, right? And so I do feel like that higher education has a role to play in pointing out that, yes, higher education is amazing. I got my master's degree. I'm very proud of it. Right? But at the same time, we can't use this as a way to discriminate against other people either, who may not have had the chance or the resources to finish their formal education.
In my own journeys these days, as I work on my own anti-racism and towards an eventual hopeful understanding that I'm a better ally than I was, I've only recently come to understand how job descriptions, in and of themselves, and the way we write them, disinclude and disenfranchise people who come from diverse backgrounds, and thinking about traditional ways to talk about our work, to focus on the impact and not the experience, to look for people who bring those sorts of perspectives. I didn't have an appreciation about how job descriptions disinclude and disenfranchise people who would want to pursue those perspectives. That's a part of my learning and something I think is just the tip of the iceberg, and I know I have a lot more work to do in that space. I think higher ed, because we are more, and all of my colleagues on this call do not kill me, more corporatized than small nonprofit. For those of you who have not worked in small nonprofit work or mid-sized nonprofit work, the parallels are almost non-existent between what we do at UW every day and what Vu has done and what I used to do and what many of you who've worked in small nonprofits are. So I think that corporatization piece is a part of this, Vu.
Yeah, it is. It's really, I think it's really critical because I do feel like so many of the things that we want, this reimagining of what the world could be and how our practices could be different, has been stopped because the people who are pushing for these things are often not in power, right? And oftentimes we have a lot of people of color who come and say, you know what, we need to talk to our donors about racism. And the vastly white leadership team will say, no, because our white donors are not comfortable with it. What they really mean, and this is, I call it gatekeeper fragility, which is that people projecting their own fragility onto other people by saying, you know, those other people are not ready. for these conversations when what they mean is we are not ready. I am not ready for these conversations.
Exactly.
So in order to really change and do community-centric type fundraising, we have to talk about HR policies and how we actually bring more leaders of color and give them the power and autonomy to be able to make the decision. So I'm sorry, Lee, I derailed your questioning, but I would like
There
to
is
get back
no
to it.
derailing here, Voulet. These are conversations. I can't tell you the number of questions that are flowing and the enthusiasm around all of this. And I again want to acknowledge to everybody, I will not get to the vast majority of the thoughtful questions you are posing, but this is just the first session of a two half days, so there'll be lots of opportunities. We only have 9 minutes left, Vu. I'm very sad about that. I think that you and I could have this conversation for a couple more hours, or that might require a snack for me. Can you speak to for a moment, from your perspective and your experience, what can UW do to create an environment where people of color, people who come from more equitable, diverse backgrounds, feel a sense of safety, comfort, and welcomeness? Because I'm not sure that let me take that back. I am sure we have not hit that mark. And I would be interested in your perspective on that.
Yeah, this is the work for all of us. And we have to acknowledge that many leaders of color, and I would say especially women of color, especially Black and Indigenous women, have been bringing up so many challenges over years. And we as a sector have ignored them, right? And oftentimes punished them for speaking up. And they get demoted and fired or not hired into the jobs. And it is terrible because I feel like leaders of color, especially women of color, are probably the biggest assets in our entire sector. And we don't create the space because we don't trust them. And we use every single tactic to avoid believing them, right, when they propose things. And we have to figure this out. I don't know. Well, I don't really have the answer to this, except we got to change all of our practices. We got to re-examine things. All of us who have privilege have to think about how are we taking up space. Like people ask my friends who are white, like what are you willing to do? What are you willing to give up? And this has caused a lot of people to think, okay, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't apply for this job. Maybe I shouldn't apply for this grant. Maybe I should not take the microphone at this time. Maybe I should not sit on this board. It's really kind of think about not just what we do, but also what we are willing to not do and what we're willing to give up to create these spaces, right?
These are hard questions, and I ask it particularly because it's clear to me that is an issue for the university, that we have an opportunity to get better in that space. And I think every time we hear about it and we get a different perspective, it makes us more aware of what we can be doing and the constancy and continuity that's required, that when we bring people in, people of color, Black, Indigenous, people of color, whoever that looks like, we have to create space for them to feel a part of the community, to actively encourage and listen to their voices and value their perspectives. And so we're going to continue to do that good work.
Thank you, Lee. I would say it's not enough to listen, because actually many leaders of color are tired of being listened to because we're actually not being listened to. If it's like, here, can you tell us what you want and we're going to listen to you, and then not implement anything that we say. Right? So no, we just need to trust people is what we need to do. Trust and provide them with resources and autonomy to carry out the solutions that they propose. Because we're tired of being listened to and absolutely nothing happening. We're tired of going and putting on sticky notes on easel paper to vote on policies, and then those things are just never, because we're always outnumbered.
A powerful upgrade, Voulet. Thank you. From beyond listening to acting on and trusting. That's a great upgrade. Thank you. We have just a few minutes. Here's my last question, moderator's prerogative. How can the UW connect better with the rest of the Pacific Northwest community to be aligned in this important space? And I ask this in the wake of launching CCF yesterday and the perspective you bring to this. How can UW bring its largesse, its influence to bear in partnership with the rest of the sector to do good work?
Yeah, I would say this is the challenge I've been seeing with higher education is you all are seen as the ivory tower. You're over there in this beautiful campus with the quads and the cherry blossoms. right? While the rest of us are out here fighting for staplers, you know? And so it's not enough for you to raise. This is one of the tenets of community-centric fundraising, is that your mission is not as important as the rest of the community. So that means that you have to be generous with other nonprofit organizations that are out there. So one, be where people are. We don't see a lot of UW folks, except when they're invited to give a speech or a lecture about the latest research or something. You all need to be on the ground, volunteering at soup kitchens and homeless shelters. You need to spend, and that needs to be like ingrained in your policies, which is like, we encourage our staff, our fundraisers, everyone to be out in the community, to spend more time in the community. So that's one thing, right? Also, you have a lot more resources and privilege and connections. Pass those on to organizations, introduce people to your donors, have events where you showcase a nonprofit partner and ask your existing donors to give money to them. You know, in your social media and newsletters, highlight the work of organizations that are doing good work so that other people in your alumni network can understand and see them as well. So we have to kind of end this sort of like, let's get as much money, let's get our donors to think only about UW and our system, and actually be outside the bubble. And I do think it's actually a lot more fun to be out there. It's fun. Find the joy of being in the community and not just like one corner of it, doing your own thing.
Vu, you have been an extraordinary gift to us this morning. We appreciate the chance to have this conversation. Personally, I love this conversation, and when it's possible, I look forward to buying you lunch and continuing this discussion when we can see each other in person. You have offered to us a significant number of ideas. You've challenged us to think differently about the days ahead. You have framed it in a sense of opportunity and optimism that acknowledges where we have been, but more importantly, challenges us to think about where we can go, and how we, the hundreds of us who are part of this university advancement enterprise, and those who are on this call who are our allies in this work, can think differently about how the University of Washington can be a great and powerful ally to advance the cause of equity and social justice. Thank you for that. I'd like to ask everybody to take their mute off for just a moment, and a collective roar for Boule and his willingness to join us this morning. Woo! All right, now mute yourselves again. Mute yourselves.
I do want to end, Lee, by saying that I really appreciate you all. I went to Washington University in St. Louis, and that would not have been possible without the scholarships that I got for being a poor kid. And a lot of that is because of you all raising money for kids like me, for people like me. And because of you, I was able to get my college degree and my master's degree. And it allowed me to continue doing this work. And so I just want to end by saying that I appreciate you all, absolutely. And I'm excited about where our sector is going. And it's going to be challenging and hard as hell. And it's going to be really exciting.
We thank you. We thank your snake plant. We thank your wife for not writing you notes when you clean the dishes. Thank you for that. And thanks for joining us today, Vu. You've been really gracious and kind, and we appreciate counting you as a part of the family.
Thank you, everyone.
I'm going to kick this back to Amy now, and we'll continue with the day.
Thank you so much, Lee. And I want to give you a shout out as well. I think your vulnerability is what made this session just ticked up a notch. We knew Vu was going to be fantastic, but thank you for your authenticity, Lee. We really appreciate that. So we are about to take a break, but I think that Vu challenged us really well to think about what we can do. So while we're taking our break, this is not something to just sit and listen to and passively absorb. I challenge you to start thinking about the actions that you're personally going to take. And as we go through engagement summer session, let's start those conversations with yourself, with your team, with your unit. I think we're going to have a really great time. So we're going to take a 15-minute break. Go get your coffee. We'll keep this Zoom line open, and we'll come back to this same Zoom line for our next session. So we will see you at 9:45. Thank you so much. I am so excited to just hand this directly off to our fantastic colleague, Susan Hayes Mcqueen. For those that don't know her, Susan has been at the University of Washington since 1996, and she is now our Assistant Vice President for Development Services. And she is that phenomenal bridge between information, fundraisers, and donors, and we are so lucky to have her at our helm. Susan and her teams do all the hard work to make us look as good as we do. And we'll have another thought exchange link for questions and comments that I'll be using to help feed to Susan through our conversation. So I will put that link in the chat right now. And so just like we did with Vu and Lee, feel free to put your thoughts and questions there. And if it's too confusing, you can put them in the chat and we'll grab them there. But in the thought exchange, you can upvote other people's thoughts. So without any further ado, Susan, I'm going to pass this over to you.
Yes, first thing I have to do is unmute. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm so pleased to be here. And thank you, Amy, for those incredibly kind words. It's easy to make the people here look good because we're all tremendous partners. And I'm flattered to be among you today. For those of us just joining, you missed an incredible opening keynote, which was recorded. So it's not your last opportunity to see it. It was really thought-provoking. It helped me think. And I have high hopes that our next session, actually high expectations, our next session will help do the same because we have such an incredible speaker. So let me just start off by saying my name is Susan Hayes Mcqueen. For those I haven't met, I go by she and her. I'm in development services, which is part of university advancement. I'm here to host though today. I'm not here because I have expertise. I'm here to learn alongside you and to listen and engage. Here's how it's going to work today. I'm going to start out with some introductions, start Michael off with a question or two. Then it's your turn. Make sure to ask questions. Use the thought exchange link that they've so helpfully provided. Use the chat. And Amy's going to make sure that those get over to me. So thank you in advance, Amy. Michael has a lot of wisdom to share, and I'm eager for this conversation. So I think you will enjoy it as well. For those of you who weren't here in the first session, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. University of Washington, and where I am broadcasting from West Seattle, acknowledges the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Squamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot, and other nations. I'd also really like to take a minute and acknowledge where we're all at right now. There's some pandemics going on. COVID is very hard on us, and we all know it has impacted people of color more profoundly and is continuing to expose the structural racism in the country in community funding for healthcare and education. And I wanted to thank you, the audience member, for taking the time, even though things are so difficult right now, taking the time today to work through this and to learn alongside. I acknowledge we're all in different headspaces, so whatever you need to do to check in with yourself or leave the conversation, please do so. Self-care is really important right now. Now, without further ado, the most important and exciting part is introducing a wonderful member of the community, Michael Brown. Michael Brown is currently the Chief Architect of Civic Commons, which is a new regional civic infrastructure of the Seattle Foundation, affiliated with Seattle Foundation, and it's aimed at uniting more community voices in decision-making to advance racial and economic equality. Before that, he served as the Seattle Foundation's Vice President of Community Programs, where he oversaw the Foundation's community impact efforts, strategic grant-making initiatives, convening activities, and impact investing programs. So he's got a lot of experience in this area. Since he began his tenure at the Foundation in 2001, he's led efforts to elevate community voices, which is, I think, what we all want to learn more about today. He's been tackling complex challenges in the areas of affordable housing, economic and racial equality, policy, and advocacy. He's also a Husky. He's a graduate of the Evans School, a supporter, a board member of the UWAA. He's a donor volunteer and an alum, a perfect trifecta. So a big thank you from the university for your service. A big thank you for being here, and a personal thank you for taking your time today to have this discussion. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Susan. Thank you.
And we're so glad to hear from you today, and there's so many great topics. I personally love a little bit of context, though. Can you describe a little bit about what brought you to where you are today?
It's a great question, and I will say we'll first start off with I hope everyone enjoys the photo because when I started the Evans School, I was 7 years old. So yeah, I in a rush I sent I sent the pic of my kid versus my headshot, but that's fine. It's still kind of the same thing, and actually it actually puts some additional emphasis on the work I do. So how did I get to where I'm at? So when I left the Evans School, I was really fortunate. I've had a very fortunate career path. Left the Evans School in '95 and went to work for a nonprofit organization, nonprofit organization. And then 2 years later, my boss at the time became a Seattle City Council member, Richard McIver, and I went over to counsel with him. I was a legislative aide and then his chief of staff. And then in 2001, I started at the Seattle Foundation and have been affiliated with the foundation since. And I think, one of the things I look back on is just, one, having some really incredible mentors who helped along the way and helped me find a path. But two is also this commitment to community, and that's not really lip service. I think it's an easy thing to say. It's like, oh, I have a commitment to community, but essentially everything that I've done, my work at the nonprofit, my work at city council, and then my work at the foundation has all been about the empowerment of community, and in particular communities that have struggled with inequities and disparities, regardless of what it looks like. So my work has thankfully has always kind of led me to a place where I've been able to have access to resources and the ability to utilize those resources or influence those resources to address the big issues that are facing the region.
I love hearing about that background. It is so varied and such an important approach, especially through advocacy, through the government work too. I'd like to acknowledge that Seattle Foundation is it's a hallmark, it's an anchor in our community. But in the past few years, Seattle Foundation, and now your work with the affiliated Civic Commons, is really approaching dramatic changes and finding ways to involve the community in funding. Can you describe that and describe how it came about that we would head that way?
Yeah. So when you've been at an institution for a long period of time, almost 20 years, I mean, you see everything and you experience everything. So when I started at the foundation in 2001, we were a very traditional grant-making institution. We had a quarterly grant-making program that organizations would apply for funding, and that was essentially it. We approached things in a peanut butter spread. That is, everyone got a little something, and we were okay with that. That for us was the role of the community foundation at the time. But over a period of time, and in particular once I stepped into the vice president of programs role, that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, if the thing that determined success for the community foundation, for Seattle Foundation, was the number of grants that we were providing versus the change in outcomes that we said that we were trying to get to, well, that was a problem. So this happened to coincide around the same time the foundation was launching a strategic plan. And one of the things that I, and I'm not going to deny that it was not an easy task, but I and my team, and then moving up to the leadership team and then to the board, proposed was a fundamental shift. that for a community foundation, we weren't necessarily serving the community as best as we could. And that while we're all well-meaning individuals, we still had a ivory tower approach, i.e. we were making decisions around investment and what we thought would help address needs in the community rather than actually engaging in conversation with communities and community members and those who are actually, who have lived experience. So thankfully, it took a long time, but, we're able to get the board on board, and we dismantled that grant making program and moved towards one that was laser focused on racial and economic equity, one that was focused on upstream approaches, one that was focused on policy and system change. And for me, as a lead of the team, I mean, that was a really important approach to take, because once again, if, and this is one of those dirty things that doesn't necessarily get talked about in the philanthropic community, but institutional philanthropy, we're also nonprofits as well. So we should be meeting mission. And if our mission is to create a healthy and vibrant greater Seattle region, then doing 400, 500 grants and spreading $8 million wasn't the way to do it. And we're making a bit of a calculated risk that this new shift and funding differently and actually engaging with community in a different way, more of a partnership, would actually help us move closer to the mission that we said that we wanted to achieve.
Your comments about the ivory tower and being the establishment, it resonates here at the university. We often look at what we do as, can we get the most people involved, not necessarily looking at that outcome, or can we raise the most money? So for us, we'd like to also switch the way we look at things to outcomes based, right? To making the impact. That takes a lot of extra work, which is what's important and what's here today, and obviously something you're extremely skilled at. How do you encourage members of the community to get active voices out there? If we want to do work, we want to be inclusive but not tokenizing. We want to include our students and faculty and staff in our conversations with the community. How do we do this in the Seattle area without putting a burden on the communities we serve and not being the ivory tower?
Right.
How do we encourage that?
It's a great question, Susan, and now we get to venture into the fun territory. So let me just give folks a bit of a sense of a community foundation. And a community foundation, in many regards, I mean, if you kind of think about it, we're a big mutual fund. So the foundation has been around for almost 75 years. And individuals, families, corporations, over that period of time have set up funds that they have the ability to direct. Essentially it's their checking account, their savings account, to support organizations. At the same time, there have been individuals that have left resources to the foundation to steward in perpetuity, and that's the endowment. So for my team, so for instance, the foundation last year provided about $130 million in grants. Of that $130 million, my old team, the community programs team, administered about $10 million, or 10% of that, $13 million. So the vast majority of it's donor directed. So I just wanted to provide that frame, because then it leads us a little deeper and also into some complexity around the question that you asked, Susan. So going back to the old grant making program, while we were doing the peanut butter spread, and I wasn't crazy about that, what it did do, though, was give us the opportunity to talk with over 400 organizations every year. So we did site visits. We met with every organization that applied. We didn't screen anyone out. And what that allowed us to do was build a relationship. And that kind of gets a little bit to your question. The collective we, don't do an effective job of building relationships. We think we do, but we don't. What we do is that we enter at a transactional stage, i.e., oh, there's something that you have that I would like, so let's have a transaction where I can get what I need, and then we move forward, etc. Versus, being intentional and taking the time to build relationship. And as we all know, in any relationships that we build, you don't do it in a 2, 3, or even 4-month period. It takes time. And this is one of the biggest criticisms that I have about not just philanthropy, but in fact, a lot of institutions in terms of its interaction with community. We don't want to take the time to build relationship. And as a result, community tends to be a little pissy when we do come, because they know that we come in to extract and not actually engage and build a relationship. So I say all that. The benefit for Seattle Foundation, once again, was that we were out there and we were building relationship. And as a result, we were able to build trust. It doesn't always mean that we're going to be on the same page, but at least the door is open. And as a result of that, then, if you have trust and you have a relationship, you get to have some different types of conversations. Well, let me just take a little bit of step. You get to have some different type of conversations, but that also requires you to listen. Because once again, you could do all of those things, but if you don't pause to listen and actually incorporate the listening into the work that you're trying to do, then it's kind of the same old. You've just put a better wrapping paper around it. So for Seattle Foundation, as we're going through this evolution, we had trust, we had relationship, but then we had to show that we're actually listening. And when we were shifting the grant making program and going out and doing co-design, we were clear that we wanted to do that in partnership with community. So we held dozens of community forums and really kind of, trying to get from our nonprofit partners what, especially if this is the frame that we're working toward, racial and economic equity, policy and system change, upstream approaches, what were things that they wanted to see from us. And once again, you have to go beyond lip service. So, yes, you can kind of spit this back, back out in the document and say, hey, this is what we heard. But then how do you, are you actually implementing it? And then are you showing that? There's a simple equation that I work with, especially in Civic Commons right now. And it's a pretty simple one, but it's the hardest thing to do. In order to get to the transformational, we need to build a relational and experience a transactional. So once again, I would just emphasize that for University of Washington, for Seattle Foundation, for City of Seattle, for Challenge Seattle, it doesn't really matter who it is, that if we want to change outcomes, or we want to have different, we want to show up differently, we have to be intentional about that, and we have to break bread. We have to actually build relationship. And and be patient about doing that. We move quickly towards expediency versus actually taking the time to build relationship and shift things.
I really appreciate what you said about that, the difference between the transactional and the listening. Can you describe, without necessarily using specific names, but describe an example of a relationship Seattle Foundation had before you went through the process of engaging these 400 nonprofits and listening, and after, and that trust building part?
So I'll give you a very tangible example. So once again, we were a peanut butter spread funder. So, and we took pride in making 400 grants over the course of a year. As we were evolving to current state, there, data was in front of us, and we were kind of thinking through where could we have great impact. And we started to look at South Seattle and South King County because we knew the suburbanization of poverty was increasing. And for us at the time, we were really focused on one of our key issues was economic opportunity. At the same time, we were in conversation with our colleagues at King County, and they were also utilizing data. And we're interested in a place-based approach in South Seattle, South King County, but looking at it more from the lens of health and housing. So we decided to kind of to mesh our efforts together, and what we did was create a new initiative called Communities of Opportunity. But what would have happened in the past, Susan, would have been that the foundation in King County would have, gone back into our secret squirrel room and have come up with our strategies, utilizing best practices. We'd pick up the phone and call folks at the Brookings Institution or Urban Institute, or, kind of continue to cull through quantitative data and map out a strategy and then pop it out into community. Community should respond to our RFP. And if you want our money, these are the 5 things that you need to do. Well, thankfully, because we were in that evolution, we didn't do that because we knew that had never worked. So what we decided to do is something different. So we're not building an RFP because we don't know what we're trying, we know what we want to solve. We just don't know how to solve it. Wow, here's a novel concept. Why don't we actually go out to South Seattle and South King County and actually talk to some of our partners and get a sense of how might we address this? Here are the 3 areas: health, housing, economic opportunity. What we want to do is something different. What we want to do, colleagues in the community, partners in the community, is we actually want to give you control. You get to have, the term RFP, request for proposals. It's a grant making term. It's basically how folks apply when there's an initiative that a foundation has. We went out intentionally, utilizing the relationships we had and trying to build some new relationships, but essentially said, hey, this is what we want to do. And we think actually there's strong alignment here, given the work and given the issues that, all of you are working on or trying to address in this broad subregion of King County. But we don't quite know what the best strategies are. So we need your help in building these strategies. So this comment gets right to the question, Susan. So once again, one of our partner organizations, and she wouldn't mind if I mentioned her name, Celie Savusa, who runs the White Center Community Development Association. And Celie and I have known each other since 2001. And Celie and I built a relationship and a high level of trust. And, those of you who know Celie would also know that she is not shy in terms of expressing her opinion and thoughts. And Celie said when we first pulled folks together and she came to me and said verbatim, if y'all end up doing the same old bullshit that you do, I'm going to come, Michael, to your house and kick your ass. And I said, fair point, Celie. We're trying to do something a little different. Hope we don't get to that point. And I say that with jest, but that I think kind of highlighted that, even when you're trying to move into something new, there was still this fear that we were just putting on new wrapping paper, but fundamentally the same things were inside, that we weren't going to do anything differently. And what, so what that was 7-8 years ago, Celie and many of the folks who were at the front end and are now with us as partners, fully engaged partners now, are the first ones to say, we didn't trust, we didn't believe that Seattle Foundation or King County were fundamentally going to do anything differently. And they have. This is an effort where it's community-led, community design, where we as Seattle Foundation and the county, we're not even funders, we're partners, we're investors. And just to, I'll close it on this. So the foundation we put in $5 million for the initial or first phase. The county came later through the levy, Best Starts for Kids levy, and added roughly about $8 million a year. So depending on the year, there's about, it could be anywhere from 12 to $14 million that the Communities of Opportunity has to drive its strategies. But we created a governance group that is more than 50% community members. Seattle Foundation has a seat, the county has a seat, one vote, one voice. And essentially the community partners, really get to decide where those resources are being invested. And that's a win, because once again, community-led, community-driven, but more importantly, where both the foundation and the county are more than comfortable with that. There are times that the governance group will make a decision that I don't agree with, but I have one vote. So, just in another example of how build relationship, but more importantly, if you want to do something different and actually engage with community in a different way, how do you share power and let go of certain things in order to facilitate that move?
How have you helped colleagues, even from King County or also the Seattle Foundation, understand that step of being able to give over the power? You're the one with the money.
Yeah.
You've got the power.
Susan, I'm not going to deny that is probably one of the hardest things to do. We're all among friends, the 300 of us on this call. So here's what I'll say. It is a constant reminder of living values and practicing and actually living those values. I am not going to, go into all the details about the various conversations I've had over the years about that piece of maintaining our commitment to sharing power, to community-led, community-driven approaches. I've had to have those conversations internally with leadership, and with the board. I've had to have that conversation at times with the county council. I've had to help educate some of our other institutional partners about the necessity for philanthropy to operate differently. It's not easy, and it isn't a case, Susan, where I'd say, it sounds great. It's an easy thing to do, but at the same time, it's what a partnership requires. And part of the model that philanthropy in particular has been guilty of, and I think, and I would give, if I'm giving philanthropy credit, and I will say most of the time I don't. I think we need to, we don't look at ourselves in the mirror as much as we need to, and as a result, we don't tend to provide ourselves with constructive critique. With that said, I think this recognition that we essentially were playing a charity model for a long period of time. We have resources. We're trying to help those poor folks, and as a result, we'll pat ourselves on the back. And essentially, we were beholden to a system that worked for a particular segment of the population, and the population that had wealth and allocated some cases, you know, on a generous share, 5% of that to support the community. We could have a long conversation about all sorts of things related to that, but we're not going to do that here. But with that said, the recognition that, you know, once again, we weren't getting the outcomes that we wanted, that we all want. You know, how do we create a place that really works for everyone? A place where everyone can really, you know, live, work, and play. And everything that we've done, we haven't necessarily achieved that end goal. So something was broken, and we had to do something different. And I will also say, you know, because I don't want to go as far to call it an awakening, but I would say that within philanthropy, you know, a lot of national conversations that have occurred over the years, I think, has also kind of opened up that door to working differently. Communities of Opportunity received a national award 7 years ago from HUD, which also kind of, you know, I think elevates, you know, kind of the model, which then allow other communities to try to, you know, do something similar. But once again, when it comes down to it, and you're talking about resources, you're talking about power, you're talking about control, and it is a hard thing, despite your best attempts, to let go. But one of the things that, in particular, when I was leading the programs team, that I was really clear about, that it wasn't our money, we're brokers. And that our job is to make sure that we are, you know, engaging in partnership with those that are actually doing the work. So, you know, we have some accountability, yet at the same time, we also need to make sure that we're resourcing and partnering with community in a way that actually works for them.
Yeah, I find it interesting just discussing it. It is, you know, it's a paradigm shift. And I do find that one of the places I personally struggle, but I also see around me struggles, is that it's hard to work and it takes longer. Yeah. And, you know, how do you assuage those that, especially maybe donors to the Seattle Foundation, who want to see impact now, that the process is going to take a little bit longer, but yet have a better outcome?
Another great question, Susan, and I know you guys talked to Vu earlier, and I in our pre-call I made the reference that, you know, Vu and I are similar. We have some similar thoughts. We approach it from different perspectives, but we have some similar thoughts. So this is where I would say, you know, one of the things that's been very successful for me is utilizing my own power and privilege. And what I mean by that is I'm on the leadership team. I have, you know, I've led the foundation's grant making team. I have relationships with board, donors, public sector, private sector. I mean, you know, so there's, and a lot of, and because of those networks and audiences, you know, I have the ability to kind of bring certain things in to kind of help make a case. So be more specific about that. So the belief that they're, you know, not a big surprise, I mean, with donors, and sometimes just even with institutional philanthropy, and surely in the public sector, we can solve this issue in 24 months. And then I go, well, best of luck to you, because it's taken more than 24 months to actually get to this point. So help me understand how you're going to get to that place. And what, once again, the approach was, we will get the best and brightest minds, or we'll get the C-suiters together, we'll organize and come up with a game plan and then go and move forward. Well, once again, you know, this is that thing of now I'm on a roll, because now it has kind of fueled all sorts of things. This has always been the fundamental problem that we have, not only in the region, but in society. We hold a community accountable we nitpick, and I'm pointing in particular to philanthropy. We nitpick with community, rather than giving them unrestricted support, or that $125,000 grant. Oh, we'll give you $25,000 because you really don't need all that money, or whatever it is, and we want the 10 reports, da da da. Yet we don't hold accountable the C-suiters, or those who have resources, who say they're going to do X and then don't do it. So that was a little fire. Sorry. So what I like to help folks remember is that a lot of these issues, all of these issues that we're dealing with, are structural. They lead back to a problem with a structural thing. 9 times out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, it is structural racism. But maybe there's a 1 out of 10 times where it isn't. Point being is that pointing to end goal and the things that need to be done, and breaking down that perception that there's urgency. Obviously, we want to solve affordable housing tomorrow. We want to address climate change tomorrow, but some things actually require us to take a step back in order to move quickly. And this has been part of the challenging dynamic. And I'm not going to say that we have solved it, because I get it as well. I would love to wave the magic wand and get it done tomorrow. But once again, I go back to the equation piece of building the relational, experiencing the transactional to achieve the transformational. We have been working and dealing with a homeless issue since 1999. Back in 99, it was, it's a 10-year plan to end homelessness. Needless to say, they revised the name. They stopped calling it a 10-year plan because they knew it wasn't going to happen in 10 years. And I think there were some lessons learned from that experience that has sharpened what is happening now, which is great. Yet at the same time, siloed, fragmented approaches. So I don't know if you ever get away from, look, individuals and sometimes still institutions, they're still going to have, a kind of a short time, or, kind of shorter view of like, we really want to concentrate our effort in this period of time. You know what? If that's what you want to do, go for it. But, just be clear then that you're not going to achieve any of the transformational piece. That it's, you'll have some nice outputs, and that could still be fine. But can you find a way to tether whatever you are trying to do to something that might then take the next step and build it towards that transformational piece?
I find that really compelling, because I do think that there's, the overarching issues, and then there's the day-to-day issues. And I do think that as a larger philanthropy, Seattle Foundation, the University of Washington, we have a responsibility to address the things that only we can do, because we have a voice, the power, and the funding. So I find that very compelling to think about, that we need to step maybe away from the transactional a little bit and work on the larger picture.
Yeah.
2 comments from Amy, our fabulous Amy, helping us out here. One, she just wanted me to make another plug for Thought Exchange, and she'll put, Robbie will put a link in the chat box, so that if you want to remember, go to Thought Exchange and drop your ideas in there if you feel like it. And then I thought I'd grab one of the top questions we've seen so far, which I thought was an interesting one. It's a little bit day-to-day, but has the staffing model changed or needed to change in order to slow down and focus on the relationships and community? And how has that changed, and the way you've communicated with people?
Great question. The answer is yes. But not dramatically. So what I would say, when I hire a program officer, I'm not. If I can get the subject matter expertise, that's great. But what I've always put as a premium is their ability to work with people. So in particular at a community foundation, at Seattle Foundation, which is different from Gates or a corporate foundation like Microsoft, a program officer might have a meeting at 9 o'clock with a philanthropist, and then at 11 o'clock have a meeting with the ED at the East African Community Services Organization, and then have a meeting with a colleague at Rakes at 1, and then a meeting with someone at the county or the city later that day. So 4 different sectors, 4 different types of relationships, and the ability to be able to bridge becomes really important. So I would always place a value on getting the right the people who have really kind of the right and are actually people or people persons or whatever that term is, but essentially like folks who are comfortable building relationship with folks. I can train you to be a great grant maker. I can't train you to be a better connector or broker or relationship builder. So, so that was always kind of a thread. But then, essentially we grew our team more because since we weren't doing the peanut butter spread and we were concentrating our grants in more targeted ways, we built up our evaluation, the evaluation component on our team, brought in more people of color onto the team. So right now, the program team of 13, 60% are people of color. So, and that's the most diverse team within Seattle Foundation. So, there are definitely some shifts and changes in terms of composition, but then also in terms of, what are the capacities that we need within the team in order to, hold ourselves accountable, but also provide some technical support. So like the last piece I'd add in terms of staffing changes or staffing model, we also knew that there would be a need to support capacity building. So we would do that from a grant making standpoint, but what were some of the more internal things that we could do? So once again, bringing in more technical skills around, helping our nonprofits partners with whether it's fundraising support or in some, technology or whatever it may be. So those would be some of the things that we added to the team.
Fantastic. I would love to hear a little bit about your new program, which is only somewhat new, but the Civic Commons. Can you tell us about that and how that came to be and who was at the table helping you form that?
Yeah. So this kind of circles back to a lot of the evolution of the foundation. So leading the effort, moving away from a responsive grant making program to a proactive grant or community partner investor. But I had this realization a few years ago that fundamentally, we could be doing all the right things. Our investments we have a vibrant democracy initiative. We have a catalyzing community initiative. We have a climate justice initiative. Our funding to organizations led by people of color dramatically increased. Our grant sizes increased. We're funding policy and system work. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. And I still came to the conclusion that fundamentally we weren't going to achieve any of the outcomes that we needed to achieve because we operate in a pretty siloed and fragmented region. So I use affordable housing as a great example. I mean, this region has an incredible, well, prior to COVID, and COVID will probably make it even more challenging. Affordable housing was one of the biggest issues that this region was facing. And honestly, there really wasn't an affordable housing game plan. I mean, everyone talked about it, but county has its affordable housing approach or focus on middle income, but then the city was doing its thing, and then Challenge Seattle, which is a cohort of CEOs doing its thing. Philanthropy is doing its thing, but the nonprofit housing developers are doing their thing. But then you have the housing authorities doing their thing. There were 17 different apples trying to address affordable housing. different apples with, honestly, about 17 different bites of those 17 different apples. How could we ever get to something that was coherent? Can we get to one apple with 17 different bites? So I had a conversation with Tony, CEO at the time, and I stepped out of my role as VP into a new role, leading Civic Commons, which is not a grant maker. We're not a grant maker. We're very complementary. We're a house of brands. So essentially, if you think Seattle Foundation is Procter & Gamble, then Civic Commons is Tide. We're a brand of Seattle Foundation, but untethered, intentionally. And what Civic Commons is trying to do is to build the relational across the various sectors that are siloed: public sector, private sector, philanthropy, nonprofit sector, and community, in order to experience the transactional to achieve the transformational. Fundamentally, what we're trying to do is create a sense of belonging, building off of work of John Powell and then Marshall Gantz. What's the story of us? What's the story of now? And how do we build the story of tomorrow? But if we don't feel tethered to each other, we don't recognize that we have mutual dependency, that we need each other, then we are not going to achieve anything. And I think, we can all look back and see that has well been documented in this region. We don't elevate or incorporate community voice into the equation. At times, we don't elevate and incorporate the private sector voice in some of the policy conversations that we're having in the region. So it doesn't, what we do an effective job of is othering. What belonging is really creating the story of us. But if we can create the story of us, how do we start to shift the narrative of the region towards one of belonging and one of shared prosperity? So we have a scorecard for shared prosperity, which isn't solely about economic prosperity. It's about the prosperity of the region from a health and well-being standpoint. GDP could be growing at 6.5%, but if the percentage of households that are paying more than 30% for their housing continues to increase, we're nowhere near being a healthy, prosperous region. You disaggregate that by race, then we really kind of see where the gaps are. And then there is the third pillar of what we call network weaving. And essentially it's the next evolution of collective impact. We don't need everyone in the same boat together, but we need everyone swimming in the same direction with each other. So how do we leverage the assets that private sector, public sector, philanthropy, nonprofit community bring to the table and move towards something collective that actually moves us towards a transformational piece? So in many ways, Susan, this gets back to short-term versus long-term. We're playing the long game here. And in many ways, why it's complementary to Seattle Foundation is Seattle Foundation will always have a philanthropy agenda. What the Commons is doing is what's the region's agenda? We're not beholden to philanthropy. We're not beholden to the public sector, the private sector. We're beholden to the region. So how do we create the place where we are tethered together, but working intentionally towards something that is important? And the only thing I'll say is with COVID, with the two pandemics of COVID and racism, if we don't recognize right now that in this region we're at a pivot point and that we can't go it alone, we're screwed. And that's what we're trying to avoid is that, we are trying to bridge, build, bond, and then drive folks towards something that works for everyone.
Michael, we got a question about measuring success. So I'd like to point back to something that you just briefly mentioned, and that's if people have an opportunity to go to the Civic Commons website, there is the Scoreboard for Shared Prosperity. Did I say it right?
Scorecard, yeah.
Scorecard for shared prosperity,
Mm-mm.
and it is a different way of measuring outcome. It's saying, if the community is better, we're doing a better job. So I highly recommend people investigate that. I wish we had time to just talk about that all day because I'm a nerd. But how would you say that you use that scorecard in making behavioral changes?
I have two different answers. The scorecard isn't an indicator project. It is a communication and change project. So what do I mean by that? So we presented what's probably more important than the data is a framework, and that framework of shared prosperity. So not to go into all the gory details, but we have these 5 dimensions that we feel are really important for regional leaders to pay attention to. Are individuals, households, and communities thriving? Is our democracy and economy vibrant? And once again, if you disaggregate by race, have we narrowed, if not eliminated, the racial disproportionality associated with the data that we do see? So the Commons isn't presenting strategy, we're just presenting information, but within a framework. And that's the piece, Susan, that we're, in terms of measurement of success. Yes, I mean, I would love to see those indicators move in a positive direction and see the racial disproportionality disappear, if not be eliminated. But more important to me is getting adoption of that framework, because that means that we are looking in totality. It's not just, we're looking at one aspect of kind of greater Seattle's health. We're looking at it in whole. Doesn't mean that we all need to play in the whole. You can still play in your particular area, but that it's tied to something else. The other piece I'll say, and this always comes as maybe a little bit of surprise to folks, because grant makers aren't necessarily known for this, but I tend to color outside the lines when it comes to measurements or what determines success, or what are we holding folks accountable to. I mean, yes, there are in some cases it's, if you say that you're going to build 1,000 affordable housing units, well, did you build 1,000 affordable housing units? I can hold you to that. But frankly, given a lot of the work that folks are doing, it's harder. It's much more complex. And what I've led, with my team and as a result, then within the foundation is, we still want the final report. We want to know what you did, but measurements of success for us have tended to be more in terms of, because we do operating support, unrestricted support, it's more of, how have you grown? What are you doing? What are you doing that's different? And trying to establish, some different baselines. So once again, there are some quantitative items that we can hold our partners to, but that's on them. They say X, great. That's what you say. We'll hold you to that. We're not putting X on you. But the qualitative piece becomes was as important to us, because once again, what we're trying to do is build, well, I shouldn't say once again, because I didn't say it. Why we made the shift that we did was to build power. And sometimes we can't hold organizations that were under-resourced for decades to the same level of well-established, well-resourced organizations. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to us. So it's not saying we turn a blind eye to things and don't have any accountability metrics in place, but we're trying to, we're also trying to build power here. So, we tend to have, some other things that we put into place. So it's a long-winded way of saying, I want folks to adhere to the scorecard. And when I think about the measurements of success for Civic Commons, they tend to be pretty aspirational because of what we're trying to do. We're not a program deliverer. We are not a grant maker. We are a convener, a communicator, and a catalyst. So what really will determine success for us is whether or not this region creates a healthy sense of belonging. It adopts a shared prosperity scorecard, And then, frankly, folks are working together in order to tackle the really gnarly issues that we're facing in the region.
Interesting. We have gotten so many good questions. I'm going to address one other one and then ask for some final thoughts from you. This is one I'm not super comfortable with myself because it's actually directed at me. And I normally would just gloss over this and say, we're here for Michael, which is true, but I will do it to put myself in the discomfort zone. It says, Susan, what work are you doing to educate yourself and others across racial initiatives to engage community? In the previous session, Vu centered questions back to Lee, and I thought this was important to put this back on UW leadership and experts. First of all, I'm not necessarily the best person to think on my feet, but I would say that I think part of this is actually being okay with answering this question, because I realize that I have a voice in this, and that it isn't all about putting this on Michael to solve my problems and to say, this is how we do it, because it's not easy. I'm learning a lot of discomfort with fuzziness, and that inclusivity, as opposed to just straight up outcomes, it's a process. And the process is as important, more important than just meeting goals one by one. So I have a lot, obviously, of education to do. I feel like the community and advancement is doing a great job helping me with that, but it's my own journey. I would say that where you don't really need to know where I am on the journey. I will say that, COVID struck me hard, and the pandemic of seeing the structural racism that my colleagues and friends have to experience every day is a painful truth. That's a process for me too. So I wanted to address that only to show that there's a lot of work to be done, and I have to be a part of that work, a big part of that work. So, Michael, I think you have really opened our eyes. I love the idea that I feel really inspired by your comfort with a fuzziness that I don't have that comfort with, and that I'm going to spend more time with. How about that? I'm going to value it more.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Susan. And the only thing I would add is, one of the running jokes that I have with the team is that, I operate at the 40,000 foot level. And on one hand, that is an incredible superpower to have, because you can see everything. It's like a puzzle. And at the same time, it becomes really hard to land anything. So I've surrounded myself with really smart, talented people who push me and force me to kind of, break it down. But the reason why I view it as a superpower is that, once again, the things that we're trying to solve are so complex. And I wish it was easy. I mean, I wish the task of the day was make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Great. I'm all over that. I can figure that out. But unfortunately, it's not. Help me understand how to address access to capital for Black-owned businesses in the region. Well, I have a few ideas, and it's going to take time. So as a result, I've tried to give myself some grace, but more importantly, I've tried to give myself team the grace, because if we're not making mistakes, if we're not making mistakes, that means we're not pushing ourselves, and we're doing the easy stuff. Mm-hmm. We're really fundamentally trying to shift things. The reason why they haven't been shifted is because either one, no one wanted to do it because they're beholden to the system, or two, it's goddamn hard. So I'd rather have y'all go push yourselves, go and do it. I would always grant for my team, the pass. If you make a mistake, great. Make another mistake. Just learn from the ones that you make. And then let's see where we end up. So that's why I can have that comfort with fuzziness, because I don't know, we're trying to figure this stuff out.
I appreciate that you don't let fear drive your agenda. And that's something I have a lot to learn from you. Michael, I can't thank you enough. This has been just a true pleasure for me personally, and I know it was valuable for the audience in so many ways. But I also need to thank you for your service and being a part of the University of Washington as an alum. You are a member of our family forever. As a part of this community, we are intertwined forever and ever, and we appreciate your service, and today's contribution is absolutely invaluable. Thank you so much. For people who came today, thank you so much. I hope that this was a good perspective and thought-provoking for you. I find myself sitting with trying to interpret some of the things, the difference between the University of Washington as part of and a change maker in the community, and our community, including students, faculty, our staff, and the research that we're putting out in the world and the activities in the community is a little different than a community foundation, but there's a lot that translates here. So let's bring this home, people, and let's make this work for us together. I'm going to pass this back to Rabia, Ellen, and Amy, who have done such a tremendous job today, and thank them profusely for the opportunity today.
Thank you so much, Ellen and Michael. This was absolutely fantastic. And just a little behind the scenes preview, Susan had a bunch of other questions, and that was the question that she chose to end on. So a special shout out to Susan for being vulnerable again. I think it's really inspiring to see our leaders take that uncomfort and put it on display and work through these things together. So thank you, Susan. Michael, thank you for your incredible work. We really appreciate it. So we're going to take another break. We've got another 15-minute break. So we will be back at 11 a.m. for our next session. And we cannot wait for you to join us. Again, remember that it's on the same link, same Zoom link here. So go use the restroom for all the coffee that you drank, and we will see you again in 15 minutes. All right, everyone, welcome back. It is 11 o'clock. It is, if you can't believe it, it is time for our third session of the day. Thank you all so much for joining us. I am so excited to kick us off. And we are going to be talking about place today. And our moderator, Salam Basongo, she's going to be talking about a lot of her work while she's talking. So I wanted to give you a little background on her to give, the intro or a little intro. So for our next session, we are led by Salam Basongo, and Salam serves as Othello Commons on-site manager, and she works to build connections between the University of Washington and Southeast Seattle communities. For those of you unfamiliar with the Othello UW Commons, it's a learning and collaboration space for faculty, staff, students, and community partners. So Salam and the Commons prioritize sustained partnerships that embrace the UW's commitment to learning from and with local communities. So Salam was born and raised in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and at 15, she immigrated to Seattle with her parents and her siblings. Salam attended the World School as a 9th grader to strengthen her English skills. After completing high school at Roosevelt, she was accepted into the University of Washington, and she studied public health and ethnic studies. Her experience being one of the very few Black students in her classes inspired her desire to understand how race and racism impact her community. Upon graduating UW, Salam moved to Detroit, Michigan, to work in interfaith community organizing in Detroit with mostly African-American congregations. She later earned a joint master's degree in public health and public policy from the University of Michigan. After graduate school, Salam moved back to Seattle to be closer to her family. And before coming to Othello UW Commons, she worked at the Center for Community Engagement at Seattle U. She loves her work in campus community engagement because it combines her passion for equity work and recognizes the power and role of institutions. So we are so lucky to be joined by Salam and her fantastic panel. And again, I will remind us all when I find the link that was sent to me that we have a thought exchange up for this session, and we are going to keep that open for questions you have. If that's complicated, you can put them in the chat, but I'll be sending questions over to Salam. So without any further ado, Salam, I'll send it over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Amy. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ellen, Amy, and Rabia, and the rest of the event organizers for inviting me to be part of this discussion. And I feel really honored to be invited to moderate this conversation. So thank you so much. As Amy said, our work at the Untitled Commons really focuses on meeting people where they are in their own neighborhood, where they work, they live, play. But it goes beyond that. It's also about centering the experiences and knowledge of the communities as we're developing programming and activities in what we do at the Commons. So really about co-creating mutually beneficial partnerships. So I feel very excited about working in this field and working in this work. And I'm also very excited to be in this panel with 3 women who understand the importance of place and the power of both meeting communities where they are and co-creating spaces where people feel like they belong. So thank you so much for all 3 panelists. I'm going to go ahead and introduce each of them, and then later on they'll talk a little bit more about their work. So first, I'd like to introduce Polly Olson. As the Burke Tribal Liaison, Polly Olson is responsible for overall coordination of the Burke's relationship with the tribal and Indian organizations. It includes establishing and strengthening ties and relationship with tribal officials, elders, staff, and urban Indian leadership. Polly staffs the Native American Advisory Board, whose members provide advice and direction within the Indigenous efforts that focus on a number of important areas, including cultural practices, exhibits, collection policy, outreach, and collaborative tribal and museum research and programs. And I know Polly, when I was an undergrad, she ran a program for young minority students who wanted to go into medicine. So I've known her for a while, and I'm really excited to be part of this panel with her. The second panelist is Jasmine Scott, who's a program manager at Langston, a lifelong supporter and advocate of the arts rooted in the Central District. Jasmine Scott is the current and first program manager at Langston, Seattle's hub for Black arts and culture. In 2009, Jasmine founded the Town Entertainment, a company that presented, produced, and promoted live music and unique events in Seattle, as well as the marketing and development of up-and-coming artists, primarily in the R&B, soul, and hip-hop genres. In 2012, Jasmine co-founded 50 Next, Seattle Hip Hop Worldwide, a digital time capsule highlighting Seattle and Northwest hip hop, and later partnered with Black Heritage Society of Washington to plan the Black History Month celebration at the Museum of History and Industry in 2014. The success of that event led to the opportunity to curate a community exhibit on Seattle hip hop. The Legacy of Seattle Hip Hop exhibit had a highly successful run at MOHA from September 19, 2015 until May 1st, 2016, and won the 2016 American Association for State and Local History Leadership in History Award. Jasmine can often be found hosting, emceeing, and moderating arts and culture-related events and programs, and recently interviewed Gabrielle Union during her Seattle stop on her real-life book club tour, which is really cool. I was gonna say, I actually did attend that MOHA. I didn't know that Jasmine was kind of curating and pushing that, so that was awesome. I remember that exhibit. And when I was visiting home during grad school, I went to it with my husband. So that was really awesome. Thank you so much, Jasmine. And then we have Elisheba Johnson, who's a co-founder of Wanamwari. If I said that wrong, Elisheba, you'll tell me later. Elisheba Johnson is a conceptual artist, heavily influenced by the Fluxus movement and the accessibility of art experiences and objects. She sees art taking the role of philosophy in the 21st century and providing the frame for discussing and solving our complex and important civic problems. Johnson, who has a BFA from Cornish College of Arts, was the owner of Fair Gallery Cafe, a multi-use art space that held art exhibits, music shows, poetry readings, and creative gatherings. Since 2000, 2013, Johnson has been at the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, where she is a public art project manager and works on capacity building initiatives. In 2018, Johnson started a public art practice with her collaborator, Kristen Ramirez. They believe in creating opportunities that bring equity, accessibility, relevance, and engagement to a community. And they believe that every project ought to begin with meaningful engagement with the people who occupy the place, whether through questionnaires, storytelling, historical research, or celebration. Elishaba is currently a member of the Americans for the Arts Emerging Leaders Network Advisory Council and has won 4 Americans for Arts Public Art in Review Awards for her work. That's super impressive, Elishaba. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for all of you for being part of this panel. As I said, each of the panelists are going to speak a little bit about their work. So I like to give the floor to Polly so that she can speak. For each of us will speak about 5 minutes. So I will let Polly take it away.
Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Polly Olson. I am a member of Yakima Nation located in South Central Washington State. And as Salam shared, I am the tribal liaison for the Burke Museum. I find that the main focus of my job is relationship building with tribal communities to provide a safe place for tribes to come in and access conversations and come in and visit the collections, as well as participating in policy making within the museum, from cultural practices to assisting with programming, education initiatives that are happening within the Burke, and really administering the Native American Advisory Board, which really is the advising board to help us work through healing opportunities, healing needs that we have to do within a museum. I'm also a community member and have done a lot of work with the Seattle Indian Health Board and several other organizations within the Seattle area. So it's a pleasure to be with you today, and I look forward to our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Polly. I would like to now go to Jasmine. Jasmine, take it away.
Thank you. So I put together a little bit of a presentation for you guys. So thank you to Rabia for managing the slides for me. And so when I see those pop up, I'll start.
Jasmine, maybe you could just kind of sort of get started as the slides come up, if that's okay with you.
Sure. They're all like time based on what I'm talking about, but I think there we go.
There it goes.
Perfect. Because I'm going to give you guys just a little bit of overview of who Langston is and our work in the context of the place. So Langston is located in Seattle's historically Black neighborhood, the Central District. And as many of us know, the reason that the Central District was regarded as the Black neighborhood was due to redlining in the early 1900s. And by the late 1960s, the Central District was nearly 80% African American. The Langston Hughes Performing Arts Institute on the corner of 17th and Yesler was built in 1915, originally as the Shevra Bicker Holem Synagogue, and it became a community center and a part of the City of Seattle's facilities in 1971. After the City of Seattle used federal Model Cities funds to acquire the building, it has been known by several names. You can change the slide, Rabia. First as the Yesler Atlantic Community Center, then the Langston Hughes Cultural Center, then the Langston Hughes Cultural Arts Center, the Langston Hughes Performing Arts Center, and then most recently, the Langston Hughes Performing Arts Institute. Many of us with close and personal ties to the Central District affectionately refer to the building simply as Langston. And as such, when determining the name for the independent nonprofit to take over programming in the Langston Hughes space, the community agreed that Langston was a fitting name. Langston was created as a response to the city and the community's desire to support the historic mission of the Langston Hughes Performing Arts Institute, which served as a community center and space for free classes, programs and activities, and childcare services, as well as a space for events and rentals. And an early analysis stated, instead of groups having to go out of their area for special convention or event, they would now have a special facility in which to hold their own meetings or events, including a large banquet facility and a large hall for their presentations. In 2013, after the Office of Arts and Culture took over operations at Langston Hughes from the Parks Department, they began a 3-year review and engagement process led by a transition consultant, upon which Langston, the nonprofit, was ultimately conceived and designed by community members to serve as a hub for Black arts and culture in Seattle. We officially began our work in late 2016, and our focus is to guide generative programs and community partnerships that center Black art and audiences and artists that honor the legacy of Seattle's historically Black Central District. You can go through the next 2 slides. Community partnerships is what is at the center of our programming and provides a place for people in the Black community that have felt displaced to feel at home, be warmly welcomed and accepted, and be immersed in Black art and culture. For nearly 50 years, Langston's significance as a cultural landmark has been exhibited through numerous programs and presentations. You can change slides. Langston has been the site of creative exploration or discussion of local and international subjects of political and social, you went too far, sorry, political, social, and community concern, a space for teens and young adults to learn solid performance skills through their participation in programs, cultural specific performance and visual arts programs, theatrical productions, and so much more. As Langston's program manager, a Seattle native and Central District resident, and someone with an over 30-year history with Langston Hughes, my priority has always been to ensure that everyone in our community, but particularly the demographic that we intend to serve, have a sense of place and ownership when partnering with us or participating in our programs. There was a period of time during Langston Hughes' transition when many folks from the community felt shut out and pushed away from a place that they were once connected to. It's my responsibility to welcome them back home. We do that by providing opportunities for reconnection and new connections. Many artists whose very first performance with an audience may have been on our stage, or someone who developed and honed in on their artistic skills in our building have had the opportunity to return for events or teach classes. Now you can go to that slide. While there are a number of venues throughout Seattle that performers and artists could utilize for their performances, classes, exhibitions, etc., many have chosen to return to Langston due to the fond memories and connection to community that is unique to this space. Additionally, as a new organization based in a historic location, that alignment has given us wider exposure as one of the primary go-tos when seeking experiences from a Black lens. You can go to the next slide. We've partnered with individual community members to create programs like our annual We Out Here Festival, presented during the week of Juneteenth and celebrates Black brilliance in all forms, or our Fade to Black monthly film screening program that explores the Black image in genre films. You can go to the next slide. Our partnerships with other local organizations have allowed us to provide filmmaking workshops for Black youth. Next slide. Welcome diasporic communities in the space for conversation and communion. Next slide. And amplify the voices of our LGBTQ+ community. Oftentimes, these types of programs are rarely seen to fruition when artists attempt to partner with larger and/or non-Black or POC organizations. This is typically due to exorbitant fees, leadership that doesn't have an understanding or appreciation of the work, and other unnecessary barriers that thwart Black artists' expression. When we open our doors and our resources to allow for Black artists to express their full creativity and brilliance, we are allowing the various and complex stories of Blackness to be told. We are also giving audiences a space to explore the many intersections of Blackness, you can go to the next slide, in a non-prohibitive, non-judgmental space, a space that welcomes community in all its beautiful forms while staying centered in Blackness. Finally, true connection cannot be made without honest and authentic leadership that is committed to not only connecting with, but actually being a part of the communities they serve or intend to serve. Next slide. I am proud to be a part of an organization that does just that. Myself, along with our executive director and board, give wholly of ourselves as we engage in this work. Every day, we bring our true selves in order to genuinely meet the needs of our community by listening, participating, building relationships, learning, and growing. During these unprecedented and ever-changing times, we continue to explore new and creative ways to stay connected and engaged with our community virtually until we can once again welcome them back home with open arms. Next slide. One last note about the importance of place is the importance of sharing stories with young people so that there is someone to pass the torch to. One of the primary reasons I do this work is because I've been a part of a community that wrapped its arms around me from a young age. I was shown and taught the significance of preserving our place, and without knowing, I was being groomed to be in the very position I am currently in. Next slide. I think that got switched around. Oh, there it is. As such, I understand the vital importance of grooming those that come after me to take over and continue this work. I want to end with a short clip from an interview I did with Africatown earlier this year, speaking about the importance of preserving our place and passing on the responsibility.
This is the hub for Black art and culture. I don't care what happens in this city, this neighborhood, Langston will be there. Right. Right. And so I need more us. Yes. Us's coming through. Yes. You know what I mean? So that they can come in and run this nonprofit, in 15, 20 years and expand on this mission and vision and values and goals that we're trying to create and uphold right now, And so we have to, it's crazy because I just feel like I'm my mom, I'm our parents right now, because it's like, we have to pass this on. We have to pass the torch. We have to tell these stories so that they understand the importance of it, so that they want to pick up the torch, and it's not like we're making them, right? But that it's a natural thing for them to be like, you know what, when I get 20 something, I'm coming back. And I had a few kids be like, I'm coming back. Yes, I'm gonna go make my money and I'm coming back and I'm gonna buy up all the houses. I mean, they had these big, beautiful dreams, and I was like, and you can do that too.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. That was great. And I was just gonna say that, with Langston, that for my husband, anytime he wanted to, especially when we were dating and he wanted to impress me, that's where we went, and we saw plays and dance and just socializing, and it was just everyone, the performance and everything is just something I hold really dearly. So thank you, Jasmine, for all the work that you do.
Thank you.
All right, so now we'll have Elishiba give us a little bit more about her work and herself.
Thank you. Thank you to Polly and Jasmine. My work actually intersects very much with Jasmine's. Wanawari is very much a social practice art project and an anti-displacement project that masquerades as an art center. So I'll talk about that for a little bit. So I have the house that fights displacement with art. Let me just change my view real quick. So these are the four co-founders, me, Inye Wakoma, Jill Friedberg, and Rachel Kessler. This home is Inye Wakoma's grandmother's home. His grandfather, Frank Green, and his grandmother, Golding Green, moved here, in the early 1960s, they bought their first home, 1951, they bought their first home, which is actually the home that Inye Wakoma lives in. And the second home they bought is the home of Wanawari, which has always been a rental home. At one time, Frank Green wanted to own every house on the block. And at one time, he owned 6 houses in the Central District in South Seattle. Now the family has 3 homes, and they're really, like a lot of Black families, struggling to figure out how to keep those homes in their family. The home always operated as a community center. I think that Black people's homes have acted that way. So you'll hear people in community come up to the house all the time and say they grew up there, whether or not they were part of the Green family or not. Everyone was actually a part of the extended Green family. And we feel like we're actually fulfilling that mission in a bigger way or extending that mission. So that's why it's important to show Frank and Goldine right here. Our mission, Wanawari, creates space for Black ownership, possibility, and belonging through art, historic preservation, and connection. So the four of us got together and really decided what would it mean for 4 artists to rent this home in a historically redlined neighborhood. As Jasmine mentioned, right, the Central District was the only neighborhood where Black folks could own property. And then over the last 20 years, we've experienced extreme gentrification. So this neighborhood at one time was 80% Black, and now it's less than 10% Black. So the actual psychological effects for Black people coming back to that neighborhood and feeling and having, you know, white folks disregard them, make them feel like they don't belong there, even though they grew up there, is very, very real. And so we were really trying to understand what would it mean for us to reclaim physical space that has been a space for Black people for a long time, and make sure that people feel welcome again, right? It's a very deliberate act. So we, like I said, we do that as an art center. We have 4 visual arts exhibitions at one time, local, regional, and national Black artists. We have music, we have dance, and the community can come in and propose any type of event they want. So I'm just showing some of the stuff we've done really quickly. So we learned a few things after we opened. One of the things we learned was the importance of arts on the neighborhood level. And again, it's kind of echoing what Jasmine has already said about the importance of Langston as a facility. People are able to just walk to Wanawari and experience arts and culture. They don't have to leave their neighborhood to do that. And that's super important, especially in this moment, as we are having what I call almost a repopulation of the Central District. So with projects like Liberty Bank and the Jackson Heights and the new Africa Town Plaza, Black folks are actually moving back into this community. It will not be a redlined community, but I've been saying it will be a multicultural community. And we need to make sure that we have arts experiences that reflect the demographics that will be there. Let's see, there's more of the fun stuff we've done. There's the house. So what we've also learned through this project is that we can scale up this model. So right now we have another part of Wanawari is our organizing work called the Central Area Cultural Ecosystem 21st Century, or CASE 21, which is where we're working with Black home activists and organizers to put out a survey. Right now it's actually, we have some people working for us that are implementing the survey as we speak, asking Black homeowners and Black cultural workers, what are their needs, right? And is there ways that we can, if Wanawari is a way that arts and culture can keep this house in the Green family, is there a way that arts and culture can keep other people's homes in the Central District? So that's part of our our long-term work of really seeing if we can do some matchmaking, and maybe if somebody has a spare bedroom, an ADU in their backyard, a spare basement, that could be rented to an artist or a cultural institution. There's some articles about us. We had our first birthday right after quarantine and had to very quickly figure out how to serve our mission of connecting Black folks around the region while not having our space open. So we have pivoted to doing online programming. We've done comedy shows, experimental performance art. Jasmine and Langston, we partnered with them to do a 7-episode hip hop history project, karaoke, post-colonial karaoke, more performance art. So in our first year, we've had over 3,000 people come through the doors, 23 visual artists. We had over 60 events and performances, 5 artist talks and 7 workshops. And if you total all the actual community events, including barbecues, yoga, African spiritual services, and fashion shows, we had over 95 Black-centered experiences in our first year. So that is what I'm going to end my talk with. Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, Elishiba. That was awesome. All right. I think I will keep my presentation real quick, but I did have a PowerPoint if Rabia, if you're able to pull that up. I think the biggest thing, you guys know, I think a lot of you know about the Authoritative Commons, that our goal is strengthening partnership between the university and Southeast Seattle. And I'm actually currently at the Commons right now, but right on MLK and Othello. Of course, we are temporarily closed for events and the public because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But I live really close by, and so it's easy for me to walk here and do the work. Yeah, so I think that that's the biggest thing. And I think the way we do this work is just to sort of get some basics, is that we collaborate with the University of Washington departments and units and communities to curate community-based events and programs in our facility in South Seattle. It's about 2,300 square feet. And we've been open for about a year, although the University of Washington's partnership in Southeast Seattle go much longer, deeper than that. And the other part, we have the facility and we do the work that way. But as Elishaba was saying, sort of events and activities in space is one, but another really important part of what we try to do is also convene and orient and consult UW departments and units and community partners in South Seattle to be able to talk about what it means to have a mutually beneficial long-term partnership. So that type of work is continuing to happen, even though our facility is closed. So there are some things we're doing virtually, but really the work of convening and consulting continues to happen. So if you can go to the next slide, Rabia. Just sharing that our mission really focuses on our equity, and that's really why we are here. And this photo is taken at the grand opening about 1.5 years ago. Next slide. And then I just talked a little bit about this, but how do we do the work? We focus on campus in terms of really cultivating relationships on campus, but really focusing on how to increase the impact of the work UW already does in the community. So it's not necessarily always about adding more activities, but it's making sure that the engagement we are doing is going deeper. That's a big part of what we do. And then in community or in neighborhood here in South Seattle, it's also about building capacity of residents and organizations, because what you will find is that communities are already doing amazing work, and a lot of the time they're best situated to do the work in community anyways, but it's that they might need support in different ways to be able to elevate their work and even grow their work and really amplify their work. So it's more about us being a supporter rather than a leader in that. And then the third part is the field. So we're not the only university thinking about a campus community engagement and also having a physical place in community where we want to work together. So it's also collaborating with other universities and talking with each other about how do we do this work? How do we do this work better? So next slide, please. And here are some of our community partners. There are many, but I just posted a couple of them or some of them. We are South Seattle is a very multicultural kind of neighborhood. If you've ever been here, you'll see a very large Asian immigrant refugee community. You'll also see a large East African immigrant refugee community. And then there's many, many African American churches, congregations here in South Seattle. There's Latino communities. There's many people who live in South Seattle. So the organizations that we partner with represent that diversity with race and ethnicity. And then as I'm talking, if folks are able to post thoughts or questions on our thought exchange, that would be great, so you don't forget your questions for later. So next slide, please. And it's really hard to kind of describe to a lot of people what we do at the Commons. So I get questions of so what happens at the Commons anyways? It's 9 miles away from campus, and not everybody gets the chance, especially from UW, to come down here to kind of figure out what we do. I really like what Elishaba said about people being able to just walk into the facility and how important that is. And we really work hard to make sure that the way even the exterior of the building looks, how welcoming are we being, having someone in the front desk who is from the community who could say hello, having someone from the community like me who is thinking about strategic thinking about like how we're partnering. So really focusing that. And so this just gives you a really snapshot of like spring of 2019, what we were doing that day. And it shows people walking in like a UW alumni. We have UW staff who are walking into, a faculty member who is teaching a class in this space. We have someone from the city who was posting up some flyers in the community and came in to give us a flyer. We are part of an apartment building. So there are residents inside the apartment who come down and try to figure out what we're up to and what we're doing. They might hear music or they might hear open mic or something like that. So we're really, we have structured events and programming, and we also are a place where people can walk in. And those two things are very important to us, that we hold both. We don't want to schedule the entire day in our space and nobody is able to just walk in and just sit and work on the computer, use Wi-Fi or whatever it looks like. So that's, that's what I got. Next slide, please. And then we work with really great interns who are also University of Washington students, who a lot of them are from South Seattle and commute to UW. And so I've been really working closely with students, and that's something that I didn't necessarily, it wasn't like my initial reason why I came to this job, but it's one of those things that I'm growing to really love, because I'm seeing that they have so much passion about their community, which is both South Seattle, but also they also think of UW as their community. So, and have a hard time trying to blend those two together. And so being that I'm a UW alumni, I really like to work with them and create a sense of community with them and try to figure out how are you a professional that can contribute positively to your neighborhood, right? So next slide. Yeah, and this is just information about how to stay in touch with me. So I think that's I think that might be the end of the presentation. So we can go, I think, now to questions and answers. All right. So I'm very excited about hearing more from our panelists. So I think the very first question I want us to reflect on is, what does it look like when we're doing authentic relationship building and community engagement? What does that look like? What does that feel like? And so I just want to open it up that way. And any of you guys, Polly, Jasmine, Elishaba, I'd love to just hear your thoughts on that.
I'll go ahead and start. This is Polly, and we're an oral traditionalist, correct? So no PowerPoint for you today from us. I think the case study that I'd like to talk with you about this morning is around land acknowledgements. I think this is really tangible for the work that we're doing at the University of Washington and across the city. And an authentic relationship coming to a land acknowledgement takes a lot of work. It is going out into tribal communities and discussing what is the history of the land, who was on the land before we got there, and recognizing the diversity and the multiple tribes that actually utilized the land before it was colonized. And so that work takes some real time and effort and commitment to show up, be prepared for the historical trauma, the epigenetics to be played out that you are going to have to hold space for. And be aware that they are advising you, yet it is a statement that does come from within you. I am finding, as we worked on creating the land acknowledgement for the Burke Museum, that it feels a bit rote, that we're just doing, we're just making a statement. It took us 9 months to come up with our statement, which sounds it sounds generic, but actually the work and the healing and the conversation has been very powerful for us. And as we move to the next phase of our relationship, I'm finding that instead of stating that we stand on the land, I feel that it's really important to acknowledge the ancestors and those that were the displacement of the original peoples of this land through forced military movement and the stealing of the land and all of that harm, that it's important for us to just really stop and consider asking for permission. Asking for permission to come and have these difficult and intellectual conversations in the agencies that we sit in, departments that we sit in, and be mindful to not appropriate somebody else's statement when they have gone out into the world and committed and made those authentic relationships or healed those relationships. I have been reached out by numerous colleagues within the University of Washington asking if they can use our statement. And so I'm working with the Native American Advisory Board on how to respond to these requests, because I don't know if I have a relationship with you and am the speaker for that work to allow it to be used for somebody else's department if they haven't worked on those relationships. So I'm currently sitting on the ancestral lands of the Tualatin and Cowlitz tribe down here on the Columbia River in Portland. And so this is actually some of my original ancestral land. And so for me, it feels good to be home and to be able to sit in this space and say and share these words with you. So authentic relationship is time consuming. It is showing up. And it is having the ability to listen and listen to the story and hold the space for the story and figure out how you fit in and want to make create the healing and the access to the work that you're asking to engage in with tribal communities or any communities that you work with. Another part of authentic relationship is remembering to include all communities and not just certain ones. I find that in tribal communities, we are an add-on to the conversation late in the game, not at the beginning of the initial idea of what's going to happen. And so for authentic relationship, it would be nice if we were brought in at the beginning, not as oh shit, I forgot. Pardon my language, but it is real, so that we have time to really do the work and engage in a full heart with you as we move forward in building that relationship. I will pause and let my colleagues, my panelists assist.
That's a really big question. I think Polly hit a lot of the major points though. Authentic community engagement starts with lots and lots of listening. So you're just gonna listen to the community and what they need. And then you'll kind of let that process drive what it should look like. So I'm gonna actually use a public art project. For example, me and my collaborator have been working in Tacoma in the East Side, and it's a very diverse community. And we just started going to different community meetings, and we learned that there weren't a lot of kids walking to school for whatever reasons. Their parents didn't think it was safe, whatever. And so Safe Routes to Schools was really trying to encourage kids to walk to school. So that was where an opportunity where we're like, actually, why don't we use our art project to amplify what the community needs are? So we hired a friend of mine, Jasmine's friend, Aaron Walker Loud, and he brought a bunch of musicians down, and we had them play music to encourage the kids to like cross the street to get to school. And we had hot cocoa, and we did a whole scavenger hunt to encourage them. So I think like I would have never thought to do anything like that if I wasn't listening to what the community needs are. And so I try to be really open because I'll never know what I'm going to do or what it's going to look like. So that's why I was like, you just got to start listening first.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I mean, I tried to cover a little bit of that in my earlier presentation, but, you know, Langston was really created based on what the community said they wanted in that space. And so literally the work that we do is a response to what the community said that they wanted. And so every day is a mission to fulfill that for us. And so we were literally just created for the community. And so that is a part of it. And then to echo something that I already said and something that Polly said, you know, and what Liz said, like the work is really listening and being a part of the community that you are trying to reach, trying to serve, whatever. You really need to, we all have these ideas about what we think is right and what we want to do based on our own experiences or whatever. And even as somebody that is from the community that I serve, that doesn't mean that I know everything. And so I still have to take some steps back at times to hear what my community has to say about what they want. I'm constantly getting feedback about the types of things that they want to see in the space, or the types of things that they want us to present or provide resources for, or whatever the case may be. And so in some of those things, it never crossed my mind. And so, we're never, none of us are ever 100% experts on what needs to be done. And so we really need to be a part of the communities and really immerse ourselves so that we can hear from them and know what they want and address that appropriately.
Thank you, everybody. Just something that you all said that really is, I'm kind of trying to, embody or listen to, is that how not only is it hard work, but it's the type of work that it is not ending, right? You're always working on it. You're always learning about it. And sometimes I think what I notice with being someone who's from the community, who works in South Seattle, but also is sort of an ambassador of the university in community, which is a really challenging kind of mind state to be in. And so because, right, for many reasons. And one of the things I see is that I think is a pitfall sometimes could be that we sort of pass on the work to folks like that. When some of the best relationships and work that I've done with UW faculty, staff, and students have been when those folks are committed to the work themselves. So they're spending time in South Seattle. They're just sort of walking around, being in the coffee shop. They're really just here and not necessarily just relying on me to do that work, because, right, that's not really fair, is it? Because as Polly was saying, well, you can't just take someone's relationship with the work that they did and just kind of try to copy that. That doesn't make sense. It has to be, you have to do that work. I can support you in letting you know about, kind of giving you the basic introductions of things. And as appropriate, I can introduce you to certain people who are ready to engage with you, want to engage with you. But the work itself, you have to do. You have to spend the time. You have to think about your program priorities and how you're going to engage. That work has to be yours. And so that's really, really important, and not passing it on to sort of who you think should work on that thing, right? No, this is your work. You have to embody that through that. And the best people the best partnerships I've seen are those folks who've really spent so much time in South Seattle. Now I go to meetings in community and I see them and I'm like, oh, hi, okay, great. I'm not the only UW person in this meeting. This is good. It's a good, healthy thing. And so I do encourage that. I think that that's some of the best way. And I also, I'm curious what folks think about this, but sometimes when we hear the word, or when we get the advice of you need to listen to community, people, what they think that means sometimes is, well, I need to hold a meeting and I need to invite all the community and they need to tell me what I need to do. And that stuff is very exhausting for community, because lots of people ask them to come to meetings. I have a mentor here in South Seattle. His name is Mr. Davis, that's what I call him, Gregory Davis. He's a community organizer and activist here in Rainier Beach. And one of the things he always says is read the neighborhood plan, because that's, he's like, we already been thinking about what we wanted to say and how we want to be engaged with. And we wrote it in a whole document. And please read that before you schedule a meeting with me and ask me about what I want in the community, because we already went through that process and articulated it. So be cautious about what that means when listen does not necessarily mean, calling me up or Jasmine and saying, let's go to a meeting. Maybe that does mean that, I don't know, but it just, that doesn't have to be the only way of listening. And so I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that. What does that mean when you have to listen to community?
Yeah, I want to say something about that too, because that doesn't mean listening on your terms. I think that's the thing that folks get confused, is that true engagement and authentic engagement is not about doing it on your terms in the way that you think it's right. And by calling a meeting and basically requesting our labor for your understanding, right? So the right way, or the more appropriate way to go about it, is to actually show up. Do your research, find out what's going on in that community, find out and show up and learn. Be quiet, right? And just learn and take in what you need to take in. But so many times, all of us on this panel, I'm sure, have had our emails flooded and our phones, ringing off the hook from people who just like, can I meet with you? Can I talk to you? Can I pick your brain? Can I do this? Can I do that? And that's exhausting, especially when we're saying the same things to various people over and over and over again, when instead, if they showed up, participated in the things that we're actually doing in our communities, they would get the answers that they were actually seeking. And so people really need to step outside of themselves and really stop thinking about, centering themselves in their ways, and their way about doing things, so that they can actually receive what it is that they're truly seeking. That grinds my gears. So yes, thank you for letting me respond to that.
I would agree with Jasmine 100%. And I think, the work that you also need to do within yourself is to acknowledge and sit with your own fear as you come into our communities. Believe that we enter with our own fears as we enter conversations in a predominantly white crowd. And it's okay for you to come into ours and feel uncomfortable. And know that if you were invited and we've invited you in, we've got you, but you need to come in with your authentic self and show up and just be part of the ceremonies or the celebration or the conversation, in a good way. But yeah, don't have us continue to repeat ourselves. I also find a lot of University of Washington departments, communication is essential internally as well as externally. I'll use Yakima Nation as an example. We call and we say we want to come in and talk, and they were like, well, UW was just here. So how can we as leaders in this circle kind of hold some better space and let each other know when we're going out and doing work in our communities around the nation, around the world, as we go in, because that is also, it distracts from the work that we have to do, especially in tribal government, because our priorities are higher than that, dealing with the federal government issues and COVID right now. So our conversation around education may not be a priority because they're not sending their kids to the UW at this moment, right? Pause. Elishaba?
I mean, so much of what already has been said on this particular topic is already how I feel. But yeah, just reiterating, I mean, I think that's where the listening comes into play. I don't even know how effective I think that construct of running a community center, having, a PowerPoint, you talk about your city or whatever, your institutional objectives, and then you ask community to respond to it. I mean, I actually think that doesn't work. And I've been, even when I was at the city, I was working with folks to kind of come up with new constructs to that. Because it's basically asking people to respond to what you think is important, which is what I think all of us already said, is that you actually need to listen to see actually what the real issues are. So I think, and Polly, you said that really perfectly, of getting outside of your comfort zone. I was doing work at Yesler Terrace and went and hung out with a bunch of Vietnamese awesome women. I didn't speak Vietnamese and ended up doing the electric slide with them. I mean, so it was just like, it's actually can be really awesome and fun. And then that was an experience that helped me understand actually really in an integral way about how different communities are able to create social experiences together in this really interesting housing construct. I think I'm always trying to stay open, especially as in my public art practice. The last thing I want to do is put an artwork in a community that they hate or they feel like doesn't represent them. And so I have to be constantly open to what people think.
Thank you guys, that was awesome. There's a question that came in through the thought exchange that also kind of really relates to the question around what does fake partnership or relationship building or community engagement look like? I think the wording that they had here is, can you address kind of performative allyship? Hopefully I'm saying that right. Can you address performative allyship? Yeah, how can it look? How can we sometimes with good intent maybe, but show up in ways that are just performative and not really, they're just surface level, not really real community engagement?
I feel the land acknowledgement is kind of moving into that platform right now. It's a good idea and it feels good, but what are you really doing? And are you really speaking to the tribal leaders around the real work that you want to do and including them in the deeper level of the conversation? Another one fake for me is, again, the last minute ask of a Native American, of a tribal leader to be involved. We should be thought of first, not last, because this land that you stand on, again, as we've said, is the ancestral land of the First Nations people, of the indigenous people and the tribes of this land. And the diversity of the people is immense. And so that should be first. And when we're not first, it does feel exclusionary and at times fake.
I'm trying to think about maybe I should let Jasmine go. I think performative, I think we kind of know what that is. It's anything that's not authentic or coming from your heart space, right? We're like in the biggest civil rights movement in history. And some people are like gonna donate to some Black arts organizations once and think they did their job, or go eat at a Black restaurant once or twice. And then they'll go back to maintaining white supremacist power structures. So I think, are you actually interested in dismantling things and making a truly equitable world? Are you actually interested in hearing what people need? That was kind of with the example I said with like institutions go to community and they already kind of have an idea of what they want. They're like, we want to change the street, we want to build this new building. And we just want people to co-sign what we want. Or actually, are you willing to say, if they say this building, we don't want it here, that we're actually going to go back and figure out what, the community needs. Maybe they need a community center or whatever, or maybe we need to move that building somewhere else. Are you actually willing to like restructure your whole plans based on what you learn? Otherwise, it is performative.
Exactly. And I used in our conversation last week, I used the word pandering because that's what it feels like to me, in certain situations. Like, you certainly know when you're being pandered to, or when you're being approached to be a token for organizations or companies or whatever. Like, come be our Black or POC face because we want to show that we know Black people. So, there's that. And then also, a great example that I think that you were alluding to was that in this time that we are currently in, specific requests are being made. And instead what we're getting is, I stand with you. Let me paint a mural on the street. When we're saying, hey, just, why don't you change the entire structure upon which your police force was built so that you'll stop killing Black people? And they're like, we're going to put out a commercial and say, we understand. And we're going to let you paint on the street. And that's all fine and well, but that's not addressing the root issue. And so to me, that's just pandering. That's like, let's put a Band-Aid over it so that we can try to make folks feel good for a moment, and then maybe it'll go away. And that just doesn't work, And so I speaking from my perspective as a Black person, like, we are in a time right now where ultimately, like, we're fighting for certain things and we're being pandered to and or ignored. So, we certainly, there's so many different forms of that we experience personally, professionally, as Black and people of color every day. since birth. And so, you know, certainly for those of us that are doing this type of work, if you cannot approach us authentically, and like Polly said, bring your true self, then, you know, don't bother with me.
I think I can also just add really quickly. I'll try to be quick because I know we're running out of time. But you probably noticed that two of my collaborators at Wanawari are, you know, white cis women, and they really do feel like their role is to understand, you know, their privilege and use that to help dismantle white supremacy. And so they do that by like staying in the background a lot, amplifying Black voices, the Black leadership, you know. And I think that like sometimes white people feel like they can't be a part of this work, and you actually do need to be a part of this work because you benefit from these systems. So you need to figure out how to dismantle them. So I'll just leave it there too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think one thing that I heard that I really connected to is this idea that, you know, it's sort of definitely not a checkbox that you could do, you know, whatever that looks like right now, whether it's supporting a Black business or whatever it is, it's very tempting to make those lists and check them off and feel good about ourselves. But it's just isn't, that's not what folks are asking for. That's not what communities are asking for. So I wanted to ask a little bit more about you guys' thought around, because right now it is such a pivotal moment in many ways. One, we're in this COVID-19 health pandemic that we're all impacted in some ways. But then you also have this moment that's really at folks' like front, that we're talking about Black lives and we're talking about police brutality, and there's some very specific things being asked of systems. In this moment, how does community engagement change because of that? Like, if people are just entering into wanting to do this work, how do they I guess navigate through these two moments that feel really, really important right now? And hopefully that made sense. But I think part of it where I'm trying to get at is with COVID-19, for example, with our work, like I'm not going into community meetings in person. But I think what I've been really telling people, because people are like, are you even doing anything now because the space is closed? So, and the communities are not meeting. I'm like, oh, we're doing more now because there is, you know what I mean? There's a lot more urgent needs that are coming forward. And so, yes, I'm not going physically in person to a meeting, and nobody else is too in the community. We're taking that very seriously, but I'm in conversation, I'm in continued conversation, and some things are, priorities change, so now I have to respond differently. So my work is continuing just in different ways. So I want to have you guys reflect on that. And I also want to say for everyone that we're at 12:02, so we're a little bit over. If we're going to try to go until 12:10, if that's okay with the panelists, and for the rest of you guys, stay on if you can. So, but yeah, how does this moment, how are you guys reflecting on the moment in community engagement?
I think we at first, when COVID hit, we tried to just pause because I think we wanted to acknowledge for ourselves internally, but also externally, that there's a lot of grieving happening, right? And just like, you know, the capitalist economy is failing, it's been failing for a long time, and the democratic socialist in me is like, burn it down. But you know, we're seeing how much it fails people, and I think it's time for a new system. That being said, we also realize that we still need to serve our community, whether or not our space is physically open, which is why we're still having programming and being creative about that. And we're starting to work with community again to figure out what socially distanced programming looks like. So I think people still need connection. People still need belonging, which is a core tenet of our work. And so we're still figuring out how to do that in this moment. I also think, you know, I could speak, you know, for me and Jasmine, that we've been doing this work. So it's interesting that all of a sudden people are like, what does it mean to be like a Black-led arts institution that is like, you know, trying to like work on housing policy? And we're like, well, yeah, we've been doing that, you know. So yeah, it's a great opportunity to get people to know about our work. But I do wonder, is this a momentary interest, or is this actually a long-term interest? But we were already doing this work before any of this happened, and we'll keep doing this work.
Yes. You know, when COVID hit and we got shut down, you know, in March, that was a super, super like hard and frustrating time for me personally, because I just, you know, the day that the governor shut down the city, I was like, my heart was beating out of my chest, and I had so much anxiety because I didn't understand how this was going to affect the arts industry. And so that was a really hard thing for me to wrap my mind around. And so, you know, I spent much of March just being stressed out and saying, oh shit, every day, all day. Beyond that, once April hit, you know, one of the best things that could have happened was the project that myself and Inye Wakoma did, you know, as a collaboration between Langston and Wanawari. So two powerful forces in the Central District, Black organizations, came together to present a virtual project. And there was so much power in that because we were able to offer something to our community virtually that at a time that was so important, not only with COVID, but then with this movement that we're in that kind of happened in the early parts of this project that we were presenting. It provided, a lot of people said, just like that break that they needed. It was medicine for them to be able to have something to look forward to each week that just gave them a break from being stressed out about everything else happening in the world. And so, you know, again, because we've been doing this work, we knew how to come together and respond to the needs of a portion of our community. And that was so important. And it was healing for me because I had something to look forward to. It was something that I have been, you know, interested in and engaged in, you know, for so much of my career and life anyway. And so we just jumped right in. And so from that point, we are continuing, this is a learning process. And so we're continuing to learn how to respond to our community in new ways because, you know, for me, I like to bring people together. I like to see you, shake your hand, hug you, look you in your eyes, that whole thing. And we're not able to do that. So we're doing it in different ways. And so we're learning along the way. This past weekend, we just ended our annual film festival. This is our 17th year, and we did it all online, and it worked. We still brought people together, and we still connected in very genuine and authentic ways. And it was probably better than it has been in past years because people needed that. So we're learning, but we're nonstop. And like you said, Salam, like, I feel like in the past few months, I've been busier and working more actually than I had, you know, earlier this year before we got struck with COVID. So, you know, I'm honored to be able to do the work that we do, even among all of the challenges that we're facing, because this is what we do. This is who I am. And so I will just do it and give everything that I need to give in order to get the job done.
We at the Burke Museum, we're kind of in a different situation. We opened a brand new building in October 2019. We were open for 5 months. COVID hit and we had to shut down. So we were learning what our new Burke is, and we're still engaged. And now we're getting, you know, we have to follow the University of Washington protocols for COVID. And we're also following and trying to be a part of the cultural heritage institutions and be a part of their opening and the work that we're doing. So we are crashing the walls in how to engage with our communities, how to keep installations going and having our research going within the natural history aspect and cultural aspect of the museum. And so with your help, when we open, come and see us, come back so that we can be successful and you can appreciate this really amazing, beautiful new building and access to museum professions in a way that we don't have in the Seattle area. And so learning, that's the new thing. It's a new experience for all of us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Same here with us at the Common too, is pivoting, changing, learning how to do this differently. And then sometimes I like what Alicia, what you said about pausing, because I think what I noticed is with all of this stuff happening, I think there's this like need to just keep going. And there is something to be said about pausing and saying like, okay, what do we need to do differently? I think that's really important. I think we're coming to the close. So what I wanted to do is just give you guys an opportunity to share where folks can continue to learn about community engagement, more about your work. Where could, maybe it's social media handles or whatnot, but where could we keep up with all the great work that you all are doing? I'll plug in my thing. So for us this summer, we're doing virtual open office hours. So those are Thursday at 12. If you go to our website, Toledo Commons, you're able to sign up to the mailing list, and it allows you to hear about all of those things. Also, just email me. It's just my last name, Ms. Gano, at uw.edu, and I'd be happy to talk to you about ways that you're thinking about community engagement, especially as it relates to South Seattle, since that's the focus of the work that I do. But I'd love to open it up to the other panelists now.
I just dropped it in the chat, but our website is langstonseattle.org. We're working on transitioning it from film festival focus back to our normal website, so bear with us. But we're on social media, on Facebook as Langston Seattle, on Twitter as Langston Seattle, and on Instagram as 206 Langston. So I encourage everybody to follow us on social media. We're always posting up-to-date stuff there. And then on our website, you can sign up for our newsletter and stay in the loop. And thank you, everybody, for this. This was fun.
Same here. I dropped our website in the chat. You can follow us on social. It would be good to sign up for our newsletter. We post relevant articles about what's happening on kind of like the land use development, anti-displacement policy front. But also we do really fun arts experiences. So I hope you come either online or in person soon. Our doors are currently open, so you can visit us on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. And thank you. It's been really fun.
I'm just up the street when we're all back on campus. Burke from Home is a really great virtual program for you to check out. And then we have curator conversations online as well. So thank you everyone for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, all of you. Yeah, this was a really great conversation. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me to moderate. That was really awesome. Great experience for me. So hopefully you all enjoyed it as well. Thank you. I'll just now take it back to Amy.
Hey, to me, thank you all so much. That was an absolutely fantastic conversation. Thank you for taking the time and sharing with that with us. I really appreciate it. And to quote our first speaker of the day, I'd like to take a moment. Somebody called out that I had a little racism in my teeth earlier today. That was a thing that Vu shared with us. And our moderators have been doing exactly what we've been asking. They've been vulnerable and sharing their experience. And in the last two sessions, I thanked our white moderators for sharing their vulnerability with me. To quote Vu again, I was writing a thank you note for them doing what we asked them to do. So I'm going to take that as a learning moment, and I wanted to share that with all of you, that we're all learning this together. And so thank you all for calling me on my racism in my teeth, and for being along on this journey with me. So I'm going to pass it over to Paul Rucker to close us out with just a couple of words before we depart for the day.
Amy, thank you. And to everybody that joined this morning, thank you for your time as we embarked on this first day of the 5th annual ESS. So many of the conversations and topics that we touched on have been at the forefront of the work of so many in our community for so long. And having the University of Washington and University Advancement engaging and participating in new and different ways is really important. As one of the 3 leaders of University Advancement and an active member of our leadership community, it's not simply sufficient or even appropriate for us to endorse, but rather to be held accountable for the work that we need to do as a community. I was struck in each of the different presentations, from Vu and Lee, talking about the profound question, what is it that we are willing to give up to do this work? What are we, the prevailing power structures of our society, willing to give up to create change? We think about Michael Brown and talking about his wonderful, simple equation of the ability to get to the transformational requires us to get to the relational and experience the transactional. So thinking of how enduring and systematic change occurs structurally and also personally, and certainly with Jasmine and Salam and Polly and Elishaba, themes of authenticity and permission and the impact of displacement in those places in our community that have been taken over by those who came after. We have much work to do, and the people that we have involved, the commitments that we have, need to be supported by action, by resources, and by an enduring commitment. So thank you for joining us on our first ESS Day. We start again tomorrow morning, and I know that we've got another great round of presentations ready. I want to acknowledge and appreciate all of the speakers and presenters and organizers for today's event. And Amy, thank you. Turning it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. We will see everybody tomorrow. And just a reminder that tomorrow has a different Zoom link. So if you don't have that second Zoom link for the second day, I'll send that over. But again, it's the same system where it's one Zoom link for the entire day. We are keeping all of our thought exchange questions up. Feel free to ask more questions, kind of reflect on each other's questions. And thank you so much for a wonderful day. We will see you tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone. See you tomorrow.